Rain hammered Seoul's streets like gunfire through glass. A woman stood trembling beneath a flickering street lamp, her ex-boyfriend closing the distance behind her with that smile she'd learned to fear. Without thinking, she threw herself at the stranger leaning against the black sedan, tall, tattooed, dangerous, and whispered the words that would change everything. "Please, pretend you know me." The stranger's hand settled against her waist as cold gray eyes fixed on the man approaching through the storm. "She doesn't look like she wants to leave with you," he said quietly. That was the moment Lyra Vale discovered the man she'd just grabbed for safety was Lucien Hahn, one of Seoul's most feared crime lords, and the moment Lucien Masitam Ian broke his one rule: never let anyone close enough to become a weakness. If you want to see how far a single desperate choice can take two broken people trying to outrun their pasts, stay until the end. And when you do, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Lyra's fingers had gone numb somewhere between the third block and the moment she realized Damien was following her. Not following, hunting. The rain came down in sheets that turned Seoul's midnight streets into rivers of neon and shadow, each droplet hitting her face like a small accusation. She'd left the apartment 20 minutes ago with nothing but her phone, her passport tucked inside her jacket, and the kind of fear that made breathing feel optional. Her sneakers were soaked through. Her coat clung to her shoulders like a second skin. Every sound behind her, every footstep, every car door, every distant shout sent her heart climbing into her throat. She'd planned this for weeks, waited until Damien left for his usual Thursday night poker game, grabbed what little she had left that mattered, slipped out through the service entrance of their building. But Damien wasn't at poker. Damien was 20 feet behind her, closing the gap with that easy, confident stride she used to think was charming. "Lyra." His voice cut through the rain like a blade through silk. She didn't turn around, didn't answer, just kept walking, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts that fogged the air in front of her face. The street stretched ahead. Empty storefronts, darkened windows. Nobody out in this weather except the desperate and the stupid. She qualified as both. "Lyra, come on." Damien's tone shifted into something softer, something almost hurt. "You're being dramatic. Let's just talk about this." That was the voice he used when other people were watching. The voice that made strangers think he was reasonable, that made her friends ask why she couldn't just communicate better with him. The voice that disappeared the moment doors closed and witnesses vanished. She'd learned to fear that voice more than his anger, because anger was honest. That voice was a trap. Her foot caught on uneven pavement, and she stumbled, catching herself against a storefront window. The glass was cold and slick beneath her palm. Rain drummed against the metal awning overhead. Through the downpour, she could make out the shapes of cars parked along the curb, their windows dark and empty. Except one. A black luxury sedan sat beneath a flickering street lamp 30 feet ahead. Sleek, expensive, the kind of car that didn't belong in this neighborhood after midnight, and beside it stood a man. Tall, perfectly still, watching. Lyra's survival instinct screamed at her to run the other direction. Strange men on empty streets after dark were never good news. But Damien's footsteps were getting closer, and her options had narrowed to a single point of terrible clarity. She moved, feet splashing through puddles, coat billowing behind her, lungs burning as she closed the distance between herself and the stranger. She didn't think, couldn't afford to, just wrapped her arms around him like he was a life raft and she was drowning, which wasn't far from the truth. The man went rigid beneath her touch. Through the rain-soaked fabric of his suit jacket, she could feel muscle, could feel the kind of physical control that came from years of discipline or violence or both. His cologne was subtle, something expensive and clean that cut through the smell of wet pavement and exhaust. She tilted her face up. Gray eyes stared down at her, cold, assessing. The kind of eyes that had seen things most people only experienced in nightmares. His face was all sharp angles and controlled expression, rain sliding down the tattooed edge of his neck where ink disappeared beneath his collar. He was maybe 30, maybe older, the kind of age where youth had been burned away by something that left only the hardened parts behind. "Please," Lyra whispered, her voice cracking. "Pretend you know me." For a long moment he didn't move, didn't speak. just studied her with those flat gray eyes like he was calculating risk and probability and whether whatever was chasing her was worth involving himself in. Then his hand settled against her waist. The touch was careful, controlled, nothing possessive or aggressive about it, just enough contact to sell the illusion that they knew each other. Lyra. Damien's voice came from 10 feet away. The stranger's gaze shifted past her shoulder. His expression didn't change, but something in the air did. The temperature dropped, or maybe it was just the way he held himself, the subtle shift from stillness into readiness. "She doesn't look like she wants to leave with you," the stranger said quietly. His Korean was flawless, but carried an accent that suggested money and education and the kind of upbringing that taught you how to make threats sound like observations. Damien stopped. Lyra could feel his presence behind her like heat against her back. Could picture the expression on his face, that easy smile that never quite reached his eyes, the relaxed posture that made other people think he was harmless. "This is a misunderstanding," Damien said, switching to English with that California casual tone that made him sound reasonable. "She's my girlfriend. She gets confused sometimes. Emotional." The stranger's hand tightened fractionally against Lyra's waist. "Is that true?" he asked her. Lyra's throat closed. 2 years of conditioning screamed at her to nod, to apologize, to go back with Damien and accept whatever punishment waited for causing a scene. 2 years of being told she was dramatic, oversensitive, that nobody else would ever put up with her the way Damien did. But something about the stranger's voice, steady, neutral, offering her the choice without demanding she take it, made the words come out different. "No," she whispered. The stranger nodded once. Then he looked at Damien with an expression that would have been polite if not for the absolute absence of warmth behind it. "You heard her." Damien's smile tightened. "Look, man, I don't know who you are, but this is between me and my girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," the stranger corrected. "And you're still here." The threat in those 4 words was quiet, implicit, the kind of threat that didn't need volume to land. Damien's jaw worked. Lyra knew that expression. Knew it came right before his fist did, before furniture got thrown and apologies got weaponized. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the stranger's complete lack of fear. Maybe it was the way the man stood like violence was a language he spoke fluently. Maybe it was the tattoo on his neck, or the expensive car, or the 20 other subtle signals that marked him as someone you didn't fuck with on Seoul's midnight streets. "This isn't over," Damien said finally, looking at Lyra now, making sure she understood. Then he turned and walked back into the rain. Lyra didn't move. Couldn't. Her entire body had locked up, adrenaline and terror and disbelief coursing through her veins in equal measure. The stranger's hand stayed against her waist for another few seconds, long enough to make sure Damien wasn't coming back, then carefully withdrew. "You're shaking," he observed. Lyra looked down. Her hands were trembling so badly she had to shove them into her coat pockets. "Sorry," she managed. "I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have. Stop apologizing." The stranger's tone wasn't harsh, just matter-of-fact. He studied her for a moment longer, then opened the sedan's rear door. "Get in." Every alarm bell in Lyra's head started screaming. Strange man, empty street, no witnesses. This was how horror stories started. But Damien was still out there somewhere in the rain. And this stranger had just done what nobody else had managed in 2 years. He'd made Damien walk away. Lyra got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and that same subtle cologne. The stranger slid into the driver's seat and started the engine without a word. The dashboard glowed soft blue. Rain hammered against the windshield. "Where do you need to go?" he asked. Lyra opened her mouth, closed it. The truth was she had nowhere. No friends left in Seoul after Damien had systematically isolated her from anyone who might have helped. No money beyond the few thousand won in her pocket. The apartment she'd just fled was in Damien's name. Her visa was sponsored through his company. She had nothing. "I don't know," she admitted. The stranger's hands rested on the steering wheel. Long fingers, a few scars across the knuckles, expensive watch catching the dashboard light. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he put the car in drive. "All right," he said simply. They drove through Seoul's rain-soaked streets in silence. Lyra watched the city slide past the window. Neon signs reflected in puddles, convenience stores glowing against the darkness, the occasional pedestrian huddled beneath umbrellas. She should have been terrified, should have demanded he let her out at the nearest police station or subway entrance. But exhaustion was setting in, the kind that came after years of holding yourself together through pure willpower. So she just sat there and let herself be driven somewhere by a stranger whose name she didn't know. The car eventually turned into an underground garage, descended several levels, and parked in a spot marked with a number Lyra didn't catch. The stranger shut off the engine and turned to face her properly for the first time. Up close, in better light, she could see the details. The tattoo on his neck was part of something larger that disappeared beneath his collar. His suit was tailored perfectly. There was a small scar through his left eyebrow that suggested old violence. "My name is Lucien Hahn," he said. "You can stay here tonight, longer if you need to, no strings." Lyra stared at him. "Why?" "Because you asked for help. But you don't know me." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite emotion, but the ghost of it. "That doesn't matter." He got out of the car and she followed, because what else was there to do? They took an elevator that required a key card to operate, rising up through floors that didn't have buttons. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that made Lyra's breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's nighttime sprawl. The furniture was minimal and expensive. Dark leather, glass tables, art that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Everything was clean lines and controlled space, the kind of place that looked more like a photograph than somewhere people actually lived. "Guest room is through there," Lucien said, gesturing to a hallway. "Bathroom's stocked. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourself." Lyra stood dripping on his marble floor, tracking rainwater and destruction. "I don't understand." "What don't you understand?" "Why you're helping me." Lucien looked at her for a long moment. Then he shrugged off his wet jacket and draped it over a chair, revealing the shoulder holster beneath. The gun explained some things. "Someone helped my mother once," he said quietly, "when she needed it. I promised her I'd do the same when I could." Then he walked toward the kitchen and left Lyra standing there, soaked and shaking and trying to process the fact that she'd just been rescued by an armed stranger who apparently lived in a penthouse and drove luxury sedans and spoke Korean with an accent that suggested private schools and inherited money. The kind of man who could make Damien walk away with 4 quiet words. She found the guest room. It was larger than the apartment she'd shared with Damien. The bed was perfect. The bathroom had towels that felt like they'd never been used. She showered until the water ran cold, washing away rain and fear and 2 years of slowly losing herself. When she finally climbed into bed, her body gave up on consciousness immediately. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Lyra slept without fear. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back in fragments. Rain, Damien's voice, the stranger's gray eyes, getting into a car with a man who wore a gun under his jacket. Lyra sat up. Her clothes from last night were still soaked, draped over a chair where she'd left them. Someone had left a folded set of clothes on the dresser. Soft cotton pants and an oversized t-shirt that probably belonged to Lucien. She got dressed and ventured into the main living space. Lucien sat at the kitchen counter with a laptop and a cup of coffee, dressed in dark jeans and a simple black shirt. Somehow he looked more dangerous in casual clothes than he had in the suit. Maybe it was the tattoos now visible on his forearms, or the way he held himself even when relaxed, or just the quiet intensity that surrounded him like an atmosphere. He looked up when she entered. "Coffee?" "Please." He poured her a cup without asking how she took it. Black. Strong. It tasted expensive. "Your boyfriend came by last night," Lucien said conversationally. Lyra's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "What?" "Around 3 a.m. Tried the door. Building security sent him away." The coffee suddenly tasted like ash. "He knows where you live." "Yes. He's going to—" Lyra's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Damien had connections through his company, friends in immigration. He'd always made it clear that she needed him to stay in Korea, that her visa depended on his goodwill. "He's going to what?" Lucien asked calmly. "Make my life hell." Lyra set the coffee down before she dropped it. "I should go. I shouldn't have involved you in this." You didn't involve me. I involved myself. You don't understand. Damien has... Let me guess. Lucian closed his laptop and gave her his full attention. He has connections, knows people, can make things difficult for you, maybe threatens your visa or your job or your reputation. Lyra's silence was answer enough. Men like him always have leverage, Lucien continued. It's how they keep control. But here's what he doesn't have. He paused. Better connections than mine. There was something in the way he said it that made Lyra's skin prickle. What do you do? Import-export, Lucian said smoothly. Various business interests. It was the kind of non-answer that was actually a very specific answer. That's not import-export, Lyra said slowly, gesturing at the penthouse, the gun she'd seen last night, the way building security apparently reported to him personally. Lucien smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. No, he agreed. It's not. They looked at each other across the kitchen counter. Lyra trying to decide if she'd escaped one dangerous situation by running straight into another, Lucien watching her process with that same patient stillness he'd shown in the rain. Are you going to hurt me? Lyra asked finally. No. Are you going to ask for something in return? No? Then what? I already told you. Lucien picked up his coffee. Someone helped my mother when she needed it. She made me promise to do the same. That's all this is. But the way he looked at her when he said it suggested it wasn't quite that simple anymore. Lyra spent the next few days in a strange kind of limbo. Lucien gave her space. Never pushed, never demanded explanations or gratitude. He worked from home mostly. Phone calls in Korean she couldn't follow, video conferences with his camera carefully angled to show nothing but his face, the occasional meeting that required him to leave for hours at a time. When he was there, they existed in careful orbit around each other. Lyra learned small things. He drank his coffee black, didn't sleep much, had a scar on his ribs from something he wouldn't discuss, spoke at least 3 languages fluently, owned more books than she'd expected, philosophy, history, poetry in Korean, and English, and what looked like French. Not what she'd expected from a criminal, because that's clearly what he was. The phone calls alone made it obvious. The way people said his name with a particular weight. The fact that he never seemed worried about consequences or police or any of the things normal people worried about. But he was also the only person in 2 years who'd asked what she needed without expecting something in return. On the 3rd night, Lyra found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m., staring out at Seoul's skyline with a glass of whiskey. Can't sleep? He asked without turning around. Not used to it yet. Lyra poured herself water from the filtered pitcher. The not being afraid part. Lucien glanced at her. What were you before him? Before Damien? Before you learned to be afraid. Lyra leaned against the counter. Nobody had asked her that in so long she'd almost forgotten there was a before. I was a medical researcher, she said quietly. Or trying to be. I had a scholarship for graduate work here, studying healthcare systems, looking at how Seoul's community clinics operated compared to what we had in Detroit. I wanted to understand why some systems worked and others failed. What happened? I met Damien at an expat mixer 6 months after I arrived. He was charming, successful, said he wanted to help me navigate Korea. She laughed bitterly. Turns out what he actually wanted was someone he could control. By the time I realized it, he'd already isolated me from everyone else, convinced me to drop out of the program because it was too stressful, got my visa transferred to his company sponsorship so I'd depend on him. And then, she stopped, took a breath. And then he spent 2 years making sure I knew I had nowhere else to go. Lucien was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. The program, could you go back? I don't know, maybe. If I could figure out the visa situation and prove I wasn't a flight risk and somehow scrape together tuition and I'll handle it. Lyra stared at him. You can't just... I can. Lucien turned to face her fully. I have lawyers who can fix visa problems. I have money for tuition. I have connections in the medical community who can help you get reinstated. He paused. If that's what you want. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Why would you do that? Because you asked me to pretend I knew you that night in the rain. Lucien's gray eyes were steady. And now I actually do know you. And knowing you means wanting you to have the life that asshole tried to take away. Something cracked open in Lyra's chest. She crossed the kitchen and kissed him. It wasn't planned, wasn't smart, just happened. Her mouth against his, hands fisting in his shirt, 2 years of numbness suddenly burning away into something sharp and real and alive. Lucien froze for half a second. Then his hand came up to cup her face with a gentleness that made her want to cry. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead against hers. "That's a bad idea," he whispered. "Why?" "Because I'm not the right kind of person for you to—" "I don't care what kind of person you are." Lyra's voice was fierce. "You're the first person in 2 years who's treated me like I matter." "You do matter." "Then stop telling me this is a bad idea and just—" He kissed her again, deeper this time, slower. The kind of kiss that tasted like possibility and danger and choices you couldn't take back. When they finally stumbled into his bedroom, Lyra felt like she was remembering how to be a person instead of a thing that flinched. Lucien touched her like she might disappear if he wasn't careful, mapped the curves of her body with hands that knew violence but chose gentleness, made her feel safe and wanted and real in ways she'd forgotten existed. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets while Seoul's neon glow filtered through the windows, Lucien traced the line of her shoulder absently. "I should tell you something," he said quietly. "About what you do?" "Yes." "I already know you're a criminal." That surprised a short laugh out of him. "That obvious?" The gun kind of gave it away. Lyra rolled over to face him. "What exactly do you—" His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Lucien's entire body went tense. He grabbed it, read the screen, and his expression shifted into something cold and focused that erased the softness from 30 seconds ago. "What's wrong?" Lyra asked. "I need to make a call." He was already getting out of bed, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. "Stay here." "Lucien, please." He looked at her. "Just stay in this room until I come back." Then he was gone, door closing behind him with a quiet click. Lyra lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sound of Lucien's voice from somewhere else in the penthouse. The tone was clipped, angry, speaking rapid Korean she couldn't parse. Something was wrong. She got dressed and crept to the bedroom door, pressed her ear against it. "I don't care what Victor wants." "That's not my problem." "Tell him if he touches—" The words cut off. Silence. Then footsteps approaching. Lyra jumped back from the door just as it opened. Lucien stood there looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You didn't stay in the room." "Who's Victor?" "Nobody you need to worry about." "Lucien, this is exactly why this was a bad idea." His voice was flat now, controlled. "You're already involved in things you shouldn't be." "Then uninvolve me," Lyra shot back. "Tell me what's happening." They stared at each other. The air between them crackled with tension. "Victor Hahn is my second in command," Lucien said finally. "Or he was. Apparently he's decided he'd rather be first in command instead." The words hung there while Lyra processed them. "So what does that mean?" "It means," Lucien said quietly, "that you being here just became a problem." "Because I'm—" Understanding dawned cold and sick. "I'm a weakness." "Yes." "Then I'll leave. I'll go somewhere he can't—" "Too late for that." Lucien's jaw tightened. "Victor already knows you're here. Already knows I'm—" He stopped himself. "Knows you're what?" "Compromised," Lucien finished. "Vulnerable. For the first time since I took over this organization, someone has leverage against me." Lyra felt like she'd been punched. "This is my fault." "No." Lucien crossed the distance between them and grabbed her shoulders. "This is Victor's fault for being an ambitious bastard, and mine for thinking I could keep you separate from what I do. But it's not yours." "What do we do?" "We don't do anything. I'm going to handle it." "How?" Lucien's expression went cold. "By reminding Victor why nobody challenges me." Then the windows exploded. Glass shattered inward in a spray of diamond fragments, followed immediately by the sharp crack of gunfire. Lucien tackled Lyra to the floor as bullets punched through the space where they'd been standing. His body covered hers completely, one hand pressed against her head to keep it down. More gunfire. The sound of furniture splintering, then silence. Lucien's weight lifted. "Stay down," he ordered, already moving toward the bedroom. But Lyra had spent 2 years learning to recognize danger, and she knew the sound of a door being kicked open. The door to the bedroom exploded inward with a crash that sent splinters of wood skittering across the floor. 3 men poured through the opening, weapons raised, moving with the kind of practiced coordination that came from training or violence or both. Lyra's scream died in her throat as Lucian moved. He was fast, faster than she'd expected. His hand came up with a gun she hadn't seen him grab, firing twice before the first man could fully enter the room. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, sharp cracks that made her ears ring. The first man went down hard, blood spraying across expensive wallpaper. The second man got a shot off. Lucien jerked sideways, the bullet punching through the door frame where his head had been a second earlier. He returned fire, 3 quick shots that caught the man's center mass and dropped him like a puppet with cut strings. The third man was smarter. He dove behind the overturned couch and started shooting blind, bullets chewing through furniture and plaster. Lucian grabbed Lyra's arm and hauled her toward the hallway. "Move," he snarled. They ran. Lyra's bare feet slipped on marble floors slick with glass and blood. Behind them she could hear more voices. Korean shouted in urgent tones, more footsteps, the metallic click of weapons being readied. The penthouse had become a war zone in under a minute. Lucian pulled her into what looked like a study. He slammed the door, locked it, and immediately moved to the desk. His hands were steady despite the blood trickling down his left arm where a bullet had grazed him. "You're hurt," Lyra managed. "It's nothing." He yanked open a drawer and pulled out another gun, this one smaller. "Do you know how to use this?" "No." "Point and pull the trigger. That's all you need to know." He pressed the weapon into her shaking hands. It was heavier than she'd expected, cold, real in a way that made everything else feel like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. "Lucien, what the fuck? Victor moved faster than I thought." Lucian was already at his laptop, fingers flying across the keys. "He's got at least 6 men in the building, maybe more outside. 6 men trying to kill us. 7 now. I got one." "This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing." Lucian looked up at her. His gray eyes were ice. "Listen to me. There's a panic room behind the bookshelf. The code is 0814. You're going to go in there and lock it and wait until—" The door shuddered under impact. Once, twice. Someone was kicking it. "Go," Lucian ordered. "Not without you. Lyra Smith." "I'm not fucking leaving you." Her voice came out fiercer than she'd known she could manage. "You want me in that panic room? You're coming with me." For a split second, something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe? Or the ghost of respect. Then the door splintered and he was moving again, firing through the gap as it opened. Someone screamed. Return fire punched through the walls, sending books tumbling from shelves. Lucien grabbed her hand and yanked her toward the bookcase. His fingers found a hidden latch and the entire thing swung inward, revealing a steel door with a keypad. He punched in numbers, 0814, and the door hissed open. They stumbled inside. The panic room was small, maybe 8 by 10 feet, lined with monitors showing security feeds from throughout the building. There were weapons mounted on one wall, medical supplies, water, and what looked like enough provisions to survive a siege. Lucien locked the door behind them. The sound of gunfire became muffled, distant. He leaned against the wall and finally let himself grimace at the wound on his arm. "Let me see," Lyra said. "I'm fine. You're bleeding all over your panic room. Let me see." He didn't argue, just shrugged out of his torn shirt while Lyra grabbed the medical kit. The bullet had carved a deep furrow through the meat of his bicep, painful but not life-threatening. Her hand shook as she cleaned it, but the movements came back from years-old training. Pack the wound, apply pressure, wrap it tight. "You've done this before," Lucien observed. "Pre-med, remember? Before I got stupid and thought love was more important than my future." "That wasn't stupid." "It got me here, didn't it? Hiding in a panic room while people try to kill us." "That's not love's fault." Lucien winced as she pulled the bandage tight. "That's my fault." Lyra's hands stilled. "How is this your fault?" "Because I should have sent you away the morning after that first night. Should have put you on a plane to Detroit or anywhere that wasn't here. But I didn't." "Because of your mother's promise?" "No." His voice went quiet. "Because I wanted you to stay." The admission hung between them in the cramped space. On the monitors, Lyra could see men moving through the penthouse. Searching, destroying, hunting. Her entire body was vibrating with adrenaline and fear, and the surreal realization that 48 hours ago, her biggest problem had been escaping an abusive boyfriend. Now she was hiding from assassins with a crime lord who apparently couldn't let her go. "Who's Victor?" she asked. "Really?" Lucien leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. "My father's second in command. Stood beside me when I took over after the old man died 5 years ago. He's smart, patient, and ambitious. I knew he'd make a move eventually, just didn't think it would be this soon." "Why now?" "Because he realized I'd developed a weakness." Lucien opened his eyes and looked at her. "You. I should never have grabbed you that night." "Probably not." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Something in his expression softened. "Best thing that's happened to me in years turned out to be a woman running from the rain." Lyra wanted to kiss him, wanted to scream at him, wanted to rewind the last 3 days and make different choices that didn't end with her holding a gun in a panic room. Instead, she looked at the monitors. "How long can we stay here?" "As long as we need to. This room is designed to withstand—" His phone buzzed. The sound was jarring in the confined space. Lucien pulled it from his pocket and his jaw tightened. "What?" Lyra asked. He turned the screen toward her. It was a photo. Damien, tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, blood crusted around his nose and mouth. Behind him stood a man in an expensive suit, Korean, maybe 40, with the kind of face that looked pleasant until you noticed the complete absence of warmth in his eyes. Victor Hahn. Below the image was a text in English. "Trade, her for him. You have 1 hour." Lyra's stomach dropped. "He took Damien." "Yes. Because of me." "Because Victor needed leverage." Lucien was already typing a response. "Damien just happened to be conveniently fixated on you. We have to. We don't have to do anything." Lyra stared at him. "That's a human being. That's the man who terrorized you for 2 years. I don't care. We can't just let Victor—" "Yes, we can." Lucien's voice was flat. "Victor will kill Damien whether we trade or not. The only question is whether he kills you too." "You don't know that. I know Victor." Lucien met her eyes. "This is what he does. He takes something you care about and uses it to make you compromise your position. Then he kills everyone anyway because leaving witnesses is bad business. I can't just—" "You can." His hand caught her chin, forced her to look at him. "Listen to me. Damien made his choices. He hurt you, controlled you, tried to destroy you. You don't owe him anything. He's gonna die. People die in this world all the time. Most of them don't deserve it. Some do. Either way, you're not responsible for saving them." The logic was cold and brutal and made perfect sense in a way that made Lyra want to vomit. "Is this what you are?" she whispered. "Someone who just lets people die?" Something flickered across Lucien's face. Hurt, maybe, or anger, or just exhaustion. "Yes," he said quietly. "That's exactly what I am. I thought you understood that." "I thought—" Lyra's voice cracked. "I don't know what I thought." They sat in silence for a long moment. On the monitors, Victor's men were ransacking the penthouse, destroying everything, looking for the panic room entrance they'd never find. Lucien's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video. Victor stood in front of Damien's bound form, smiling at the camera like he was recording a birthday message. His English was perfect, barely accented. "Lucien, I know you're watching. I know you're hiding somewhere with your new pet." He gestured casually at Damien. "This one's been telling me interesting things about how you intervened in their relationship, about how protective you've become. Very unlike you." Victor walked closer to Damien, pulled out a knife. The blade caught the warehouse lighting. "You have 45 minutes now. Bring the girl to the address I'm sending. Come alone, or I start cutting pieces off this one and sending them to you." The video ended. Lyra's hands were shaking. "We have to—" "No." "Lucien." I said no. His voice was hard now, the softness from earlier completely gone. "Victor wants you because he knows killing you is the fastest way to make me act stupid, and if I act stupid, I die. And if I die, he takes over an organization that runs half the underground economy in Seoul. That's thousands of lives affected, dozens of territories destabilized, and a power vacuum that will drown this city in blood. So one life doesn't matter against thousands. In this world? No, it doesn't. Lyra looked at him. Really looked at him. At the cold calculation in his gray eyes, the controlled posture, the absolute certainty that he was making the right choice. This was what he'd tried to tell her, that he wasn't the right kind of person, that getting involved with him was a bad idea. She just hadn't wanted to believe it. "I'm going anyway," she said quietly. Lucien's expression didn't change. "No, you're not. You can't stop me. I can lock you in here. Then Victor wins." Lyra met his eyes. "Because you'll have become exactly what he expects. Someone who locks up women to keep them safe instead of trusting them to make their own choices." That landed. She watched it hit him, watched him process the comparison to Damien, watched his jaw tighten. "That's not fair," he said. "Neither is watching someone die because saving them is inconvenient. This isn't about convenience. This is about survival. Yours or mine." Lucien didn't answer. On the monitors, Victor's men had given up searching and were setting up in the living room, waiting. They knew Lucien and Lyra had to come out eventually. "What if I have a plan?" Lyra asked. "What kind of plan?" "The kind where you don't have to sacrifice your organization, and I don't have to live knowing I let someone die." "Victor's not an idiot. Whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking he expects you to either show up and fight or hide and wait him out." Lyra's mind was racing now, adrenaline sharpening her thoughts. "He doesn't expect someone who knows nothing about your world to walk in and offer herself up, because that's suicide. Not if you're watching, not if you use me as a distraction." Lucien stared at her. "You want to use yourself as bait. I want to do something other than hide." Lyra's voice was steady now, the fear transmuting into something harder. "I spent 2 years being afraid, being small, letting Damien tell me I was weak and useless and needed him to survive. I'm done being that person. This is different than standing up to an abusive boyfriend. Is it? Because right now you're telling me to stay hidden and let the men handle the dangerous work. Sounds pretty fucking familiar to me." Lucien's expression darkened. "That's not what I'm—" "Then what are you doing?" They locked eyes. The panic room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. "I'm trying to keep you alive," Lucien said finally, "by making my choices for me. By making the smart choice you're too stubborn to make. Maybe I don't want smart. Maybe I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror after this is over." Lucien laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think this is about morality? About being a good person?" "Lyra, I've killed 14 people. 14 that I did myself. I don't even know how many died on my orders. You want to talk about mirrors? I stopped looking in them years ago." The admission was raw and ugly and real. Lyra reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold. "Then maybe it's time you started looking again," she said quietly. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Just sat there holding her hand in the dim light of the panic room while gunmen waited in his destroyed penthouse, and a man she used to love sat bound in a warehouse waiting to die. Finally, Lucien exhaled. "If I agree to this," he said slowly, "you do exactly what I tell you. No improvising, no heroics. You're bait, not a soldier. Okay? I mean it, Lyra. The second I say run, you run. The second I say hide, you hide. You don't argue, you don't question, you just do it. I understand. And if this goes wrong," his grip tightened, "if Victor gets his hands on you, he won't. If he does," Lucien continued, voice hard, "you use that gun I gave you, on yourself, not on him. You understand? Because what he'll do to you before he kills you is worse than any bullet." Lyra's throat went dry, but she nodded. "Say it. If he catches me, I use the gun on myself." Lucien studied her face like he was memorizing it. Then he stood and moved to the wall of weapons, started pulling down gear with efficient, practiced movements. "We need to move fast," he said. "Victor's timeline isn't real. He'll kill Damien in 30 minutes whether we show up or not. This is about forcing a mistake. So we don't go to the warehouse. No. We let him think we're coming, make him commit his forces to that location, Then we hit him where he's not expecting it. Where's that? Lucian smiled. It was the coldest expression Lyra had ever seen. His home, he said. They spent the next 10 minutes planning in rapid, clipped sentences. Lucian called in markers with people whose names Lyra didn't recognize. Made promises she suspected would cost more than money. Assembled a plan that relied on timing and misdirection and what felt like an insane amount of trust in people he claimed were loyal. How do you know they won't betray you too? Lyra asked. I don't, Lucian admitted. But Victor needed 6 men to take me on. That means he couldn't convince the other 20 to join him. Some of those are afraid. Some are opportunists waiting to see who wins. But a few are actually loyal. Why? Because I pay better than my father did. Because I don't kill on impulse. Because I keep my word. He checked the magazine on his gun. In this world, that actually means something. The plan was simple in concept, horrifying in execution. Lyra would call Victor directly and offer to turn herself in, say she'd escaped from Lucien, that she was done being used as a pawn, that she'd surrender if he guaranteed Damien's safety. The story had to sell. Panicked, emotional, desperate. Meanwhile, Lucien would take 2 of his most trusted men and hit Victor's apartment across the city. Not to kill him, Victor wouldn't be there, but to grab his sister. He has a sister? Lyra asked. Half-sister, university student. Doesn't know what Victor does. Lucien's voice was flat. She's innocent, and she's the only thing Victor actually cares about. So we're kidnapping an innocent girl. We're creating leverage. That's the same thing. Yes, Lucian said. It is. You want to back out now? Lyra thought about it. About innocent people being dragged into violence they didn't earn. About becoming complicit in the exact kind of brutality she'd spent years trying to escape. But she also thought about Damien, tied to a chair, waiting to die because she'd asked a stranger for help. No, she said. Let's do it. Lucian made 3 more calls, gave orders in Korean that sounded like death sentences. Then he turned to Lyra. You ready? No. Good. People who think they're ready get killed. He handed her a phone, a burner, not his regular device. Victor's number is programmed in. When you call, you're going to sound terrified, desperate, like you'll do anything to make this stop. That won't be hard. Remember, you escaped through the panic room's secondary exit after I passed out from the gunshot wound. You've been running through the city for the last hour. You saw the video. You're horrified. You just want this to be over. What if he doesn't believe me? He will, because you showing up alone is exactly what his ego wants. Lucien's expression was grim. Victor thinks women are weaknesses, resources to exploit. He won't suspect you have your own plan because in his mind, women don't make plans. Sounds like a lovely person. Most criminals aren't. Lucian checked his watch. We move in 5 minutes. Once you make the call, we're committed. No going back. Those 5 minutes felt both infinite and instantaneous. Lyra stood in the panic room trying to calm her breathing while Lucien finalized details with his team. The monitors showed Victor's men still waiting in the destroyed penthouse. Patient, professional, the kind of patience that came from experience. They'll hear us leave, Lyra said. No, they won't. The secondary exit leads to the building's maintenance level. We'll be 3 floors down before they realize we're gone. And then we split up. You take a car to the meeting point Victor gives you. I take my team to his sister's apartment. We grab her, I call Victor, and we negotiate a trade. His sister and Damien for you and safe passage out of Seoul. He'll never agree to that. He won't have a choice. Not if he wants his sister alive. Lyra looked at him. Would you actually kill her? If he refused? Lucian didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. I don't know, he admitted. I've never had to find out. The honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. Time, Lucian said. They moved. The secondary exit was hidden behind a false panel in the panic room's back wall. It opened onto a narrow maintenance corridor that smelled like dust and old concrete. Lucian led the way with a gun in one hand and a phone in the other, moving fast but controlled through the darkness. They descended 3 flights of service stairs, emerging in a parking garage Lyra didn't recognize. 2 cars waited, a nondescript sedan and a black SUV. 2 men stood beside them, both armed, both watching Lucien with expressions Lyra couldn't read. "This is Lyra," Lucien said in English. "She's under my protection. Anyone touches her, I'll kill them myself." The two men nodded. Neither looked surprised. "Jinho will drive you to the location Victor gives you," Lucien continued, gesturing to the younger of the two men. "Sung-min is with me. You follow Jinho's instructions exactly. You understand?" "Yes," Lyra said. Lucien turned to her. For a moment, his cold, controlled mask slipped, and she saw the fear underneath. "Don't die," he said quietly. "You either." He kissed her then, hard and desperate and tasting like goodbye. Then he pulled away, climbed into the SUV with Sung-min, and drove into the Seoul night without looking back. Jinho opened the sedan's passenger door. "We should go." Lyra got in. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the burner phone. Victor's number glowed on the screen. One call. That's all it would take to set everything in motion. She pressed dial. The phone rang twice before Victor answered. "Well," he said pleasantly, "this is unexpected." "I want to make a deal," Lyra said. Her voice cracked perfectly, fear and exhaustion bleeding through. Not hard to fake when it was mostly real. "What kind of deal?" "You let Damien go. I'll turn myself in. No more running, no more hiding. Just let him go." Victor laughed. "And why would I do that?" "Because I know you don't actually want him. You want to hurt Lucien. And the best way to hurt Lucien is through me." Lyra let her voice drop to a whisper. "He's unconscious. The gunshot wound got infected. I used the panic room's medical supplies, but it's not enough. He's dying and I can't watch him die because of me." Silence on the other end. Calculating silence. "Where are you?" Victor asked. "I don't know. Some parking garage. I ran after we got separated." "You ran from Lucien Huan's panic room." There was a second exit. "He passed out and I panicked and I need this to stop." More silence. Lyra held her breath. "Send me your location," Victor said finally. "I'll send a car." "No, I'll meet you. Just tell me where." "Why?" "Because I don't trust you not to just shoot me the second I get in a car with your men." Lyra let genuine fear bleed into her voice. "I want to see Damien first. I want to know he's alive. Then I'll surrender." Victor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, there was something new in his voice. Respect, maybe. Or amusement. "You're smarter than you look," he said. "All right, there's a restaurant in Gangnam. The Golden Phoenix, top floor. Come alone. You have 30 minutes. The line went dead. Lyra looked at Jinho. "The Golden Phoenix in Gangnam." He nodded and started driving. They moved through Seoul's midnight streets in silence. Lyra watched the city slide past, neon signs and dark alleys, late-night restaurants, and empty parks. Somewhere out there, Lucien was breaking into Victor's sister's apartment, committing violence against an innocent person to save someone who probably didn't deserve saving. This was the world she'd stepped into, the world where people like Lucien made impossible choices and lived with them. She wondered if she'd be able to live with hers. "You should know something," Jinho said suddenly. His English was careful, accented. "Boss never lets anyone close, not in 5 years. Then you show up, and he breaks every rule he has." "I'm not sure that's a compliment." "It's not." Jinho glanced at her. "It means he's compromised, weak. In our world, that gets you killed." "Then why are you helping him?" "Because he's still better than Victor." Jinho's hands tightened on the wheel. "Victor enjoys the violence. Boss just accepts it as necessary. That's the difference." They pulled up outside the Golden Phoenix 15 minutes later. It was an upscale restaurant in one of Gangnam's expensive districts, the kind of place where criminals and businessmen sat at adjacent tables and nobody asked questions. "He'll have men inside," Jinho said. "At least 4, maybe more. They won't kill you immediately. Victor wants to gloat first." Comforting. "Boss will call when he has the sister. When he does, you tell Victor. That's when things get dangerous." "They're not dangerous now?" Jinho almost smiled. "Now you're just bait. After the call, you're a liability." Lyra got out of the car. Her legs felt unsteady. The gun Lucien had given her was a small, hard weight against the small of her back, hidden beneath her jacket. She walked into the Golden Phoenix. The restaurant was quiet this time of night. A few late diners lingering over expensive wine, soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. A hostess approached with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Reservation name?" she asked in Korean. "Victor sent me," Lyra said in English. The hostess's smile never wavered. "Top floor, private room. You'll find it." Lyra took the elevator up. Her reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, exhausted, terrified, trying to look brave. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman in way over her head, playing at being dangerous. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway. One door stood ajar at the far end. Lyra walked toward it. Inside was a private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering sprawl. Victor Hahn sat at a table in the center, perfectly composed in his expensive suit. Damien was in a chair beside him, still bound, still bloody, but alive and conscious. 4 armed men stood at intervals around the room. Victor smiled as Lyra entered. "You actually came," he said. "I'm impressed." "I said I would. People say many things when they're afraid. Following through is rarer." Victor gestured to an empty chair. "Please, sit. Let's talk like civilized people." Lyra sat, kept her hands visible, her posture small, playing the part of someone who'd already accepted defeat. "Is he okay?" she asked, looking at Damien. Damien's one good eye fixed on her. Even battered and bound, there was something in his expression that made her stomach turn. Possession. Like even now he thought she belonged to him. "He's alive," Victor said. "That's more than most people in his position can claim. I kept my end of the deal. Let him go. In a moment." Victor poured himself wine from a bottle that probably cost more than Lyra's monthly rent used to. "First, I want to understand something. What exactly does Lucien Juan see in you?" "I don't know." "You must have some idea. He's risked everything. His organization, his reputation, his life, for a woman he's known less than a week." Victor sipped his wine. "That's not like him. Lucien doesn't form attachments. He's cold, controlled, utterly pragmatic. Then you appear and suddenly he's acting like a lovesick fool." "Maybe he's just a better person than you think." Victor laughed. "Oh, my dear, he's not. He's a killer who inherited his father's empire and rules through calculated violence and strategic fear. He's just better at hiding it than most of us." "If you say so." "I do say so. I've known him since he was 16 years old, watched him become what he is. And I promise you, whatever you think you know about him is a carefully constructed lie." Lyra met his eyes. "And what about you? What's your excuse for being a monster?" The smile dropped from Victor's face. "Careful," he said quietly. "I'm being pleasant. Don't make me reconsider." Lyra's phone buzzed in her pocket. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Answer it." She pulled out the burner. Lucien's name flashed on the screen. Her heart hammered as she accepted the call. "We have her," Lucien's voice said, flat, cold. "Victor's sister, 23 years old, engineering student at Seoul National University. Currently zip-tied to a chair in a warehouse in Mappo." Lyra looked at Victor. "He has your sister." Victor's pleasant mask finally cracked. His hand moved so fast Lyra barely saw it. One second he was sitting relaxed, the next he had a gun pointed at her face. "Put him on speaker," Victor said. Lyra obeyed. "Hello, Victor." Lucien's voice filled the room. "I believe we need to renegotiate terms." "You touch her." Victor's voice was pure venom now. "I won't, not if you're smart." Lucien sounded almost bored. "Here's how this works. You release Damien and Lyra. Right now. They walk out of whatever overpriced restaurant you're holding court in and get in the car waiting outside. Once I confirm they're safe, I release your sister. Everyone goes home. Nobody dies tonight. And if I refuse, then your sister learns exactly what her beloved brother does for a living, right before she stops breathing." Silence. Deadly, absolute silence. Victor's gun never wavered from Lyra's face. "You wouldn't," Victor said finally. "You have rules, lines you don't cross." "I had rules," Lucien corrected. "Then you kicked in my door and tried to kill the only person I've cared about in 5 years. So congratulations, Victor. You successfully made me stop giving a fuck." Victor's finger tightened on the trigger, and Lyra realized with absolute clarity that he was going to shoot her anyway, that this had always been how it would end. She dove sideways as the gun went off. The bullet punched through the space where Lyra's head had been a heartbeat earlier, shattering the window behind her into a spiderweb of cracks. She hit the floor hard, shoulder screaming as she rolled behind an overturned chair. Victor's gun tracked her movement, firing twice more, wood splinters exploding where her body had just been. Then the room erupted into chaos. The door burst open and Jinho came through firing, catching one of Victor's men in the chest before diving behind the serving table. Return fire chewed through expensive furniture and decorative paintings. Damien screamed something incoherent from his chair, still bound, unable to move as bullets flew around him. Lyra's hand found the gun at the small of her back. She'd never fired a weapon before. Didn't know if she could make herself pull the trigger on another human being. Victor solved that problem by shooting at her again. She fired back. 3 quick shots that went wide but forced him to duck behind the table. The recoil nearly tore the gun from her grip. Her ears rang from the enclosed space gunfire. "Lyra!" Jinho's voice cut through the noise. "Window! Go!" She looked at the cracked glass. They were 15 floors up. Going through that window meant dying on Seoul's pavement, but staying meant dying here. Jinho laid down covering fire while Lyra scrambled toward the window. Her hands found a chair, swung it with everything she had. The already damaged glass exploded outward into the night. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. "There's a ledge!" Jinho shouted. 3 feet down, fire escape around the corner. "Are you fucking serious? Go! Boss's orders!" Victor rose from behind the table, gun raised. Lyra didn't think, just stepped through the window frame onto the narrow concrete ledge outside. The wind hit her like a fist. Seoul sprawled below, a drop that would turn her body into paste if she slipped. Rain had made the ledge slick as ice. She pressed herself flat against the building, fingers scrabbling for purchase on wet concrete. Behind her, gunfire continued. She could hear Jinho shouting in Korean, Victor's voice responding with cold fury. Somewhere in that chaos, Damien was still screaming. Lyra edged along the ledge. Each step felt like the last one before gravity claimed her. Her fingers were numb. Her breathing came in short, panicked gasps that fogged the air. The fire escape was 10 feet away. Might as well have been a mile. She moved, 1 foot in front of the other, not looking down, not thinking about the drop or the wind or the way her shoes kept slipping on rain-soaked concrete. She was 5 feet from the fire escape when the window beside her exploded. Victor came through it like something out of a nightmare, moving with predator grace despite the bullets Jinho had put in him. Blood soaked his expensive suit, but he was still standing, still moving, still coming for her with murder in his eyes. "You stupid girl," he snarled. "You think Lucien will save you? He doesn't save anyone. He uses people up and throws them away." Lyra raised her gun. Her hand shook so badly she could barely aim. "Go ahead," Victor said. "You've never killed anyone. You don't have it in you." He was right. She pulled the trigger anyway. The shot went high and wide, punching into brick somewhere above Victor's head. He smiled and lunged. Lyra threw herself backward. Her feet left the ledge. For one terrible moment she was falling, wind screaming past her ears, Seoul's lights blurring below her. Her hand caught the fire escape railing. The impact nearly tore her arm from its socket. She dangled there, feet kicking empty air, fingers slipping on wet metal. Above her, Victor stood on the ledge looking down with an expression that might have been respect. "Impressive," he said, "but not enough." He raised his gun. The shot never came. Jinho appeared in his broken window behind Victor and put 3 bullets in his back. Victor's body jerked forward, momentum carrying him off the ledge. He fell past Lyra without making a sound, tumbling end over end until he hit the pavement below with a wet crunch that made her stomach heave. "Climb!" Jinho shouted. Lyra's arms were screaming. She got one elbow over the railing, then the other, hauling herself up through pure terror-fueled adrenaline. She collapsed on the fire escape's metal grating, gulping air like a drowning woman. Jinho was beside her a moment later. "Can you move?" "I don't know." "You need to. Victor's men are still inside." He pulled her to her feet, and they descended the fire escape in a controlled fall that was barely short of jumping. They hit an alley 2 blocks from the Golden Phoenix, both of them soaked in sweat and rain, and probably blood. A car screeched to a stop beside them. The back door flew open and Lucien's voice came from inside. "Get in!" They piled in. Lucien was driving, his face like carved stone as he gunned the engine and tore into Seoul traffic. Beside him sat a young woman, early 20s, terrified, with zip-tie marks on her wrists, Victor's sister. "Is he dead?" Lucien asked. "Yes," Jin-ho confirmed. "Good." Lucien's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. His eyes found Lyra in the rear-view mirror. "You're hurt." "I'm alive." "That's not what I asked." Her shoulder was probably dislocated from catching the fire escape. Her hands were bleeding from the ledge. Everything hurt in ways that suggested bruises and pulled muscles and minor trauma that would hurt worse tomorrow. "I'm fine," she lied. Lucien's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Just drove through Seoul's midnight streets like the devil himself was chasing them. Victor's sister spoke suddenly, voice shaking. "What's happening? Where's my brother?" Nobody answered. "Please," she continued in accented English. "I don't understand. This man came to my apartment and he had a gun and he said—" Her voice broke. "Where is Victor?" Lyra met Lucien's eyes in the mirror. He gave a tiny shake of his head. "Not yet." They drove for another 20 minutes, taking random turns and doubling back twice before Lucien seemed satisfied they weren't being followed. He pulled into an underground parking garage and killed the engine. The silence was deafening. "What about Damien?" Lyra asked. Lucien looked at Jin-ho. "You get him out?" "No time. Victor's remaining men were on us too fast." The words settled like stones in Lyra's stomach. "So he's still there." "With 4 armed men and a dead boss," Jin-ho confirmed. "They'll cut him loose or kill him. Either way, not our problem anymore." "Not our—" Lyra's voice cracked. "He's going to die." "Maybe." Lucien turned to face her properly. "Or maybe Victor's men will realize they just lost their meal ticket and decide keeping a hostage alive is bad business. Either way, we can't go back." "Because it's too dangerous." "Because it's suicide." Lucien's voice was flat. "Victor's dead, but his organization isn't. The second they find his body, every man he had on payroll will be hunting us. Going back for Damien means walking into a kill box." "So we just leave him?" "Yes." Lyra stared at him. At the cold calculation in his eyes, the absolute certainty that he was making the right choice. This was what Jin-ho had tried to warn her about. This was what Lucien had tried to tell her from the beginning. In his world, people were resources, variables in an equation, and Damien's life didn't balance against the risk of going back. "I can't accept that," Lyra said quietly. "You don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." "Not in this world?" Lucien's expression was stone. "You made your play. You rolled the dice. It didn't work out. That's how this goes. For you, maybe, not for me." "Then what do you want to do? Go back alone? Storm the Golden Phoenix with a gun you barely know how to use? Get yourself killed trying to save a man who spent 2 years destroying you? At least I'd be able to live with myself after." That landed. She watched it hit him, watched something flicker across his face, hurt or anger or just exhaustion. "You think I can live with myself?" Lucien asked. "You think I sleep well at night knowing all the choices I've made?" "I think you've gotten good at justifying them." "That's not fair. Neither is this." Lyra gestured at Victor's sister, at Jin-ho, at the car in the parking garage, and the entire situation. "We kidnapped an innocent woman. We started a war. We got Victor killed. And for what? So I could escape an abusive boyfriend?" "So you could survive," Lucien corrected. "That's what this was about. Survival. At what cost?" "Whatever it takes." Lyra looked at him, really looked at him, at the scars and the tattoos and the absolute absence of doubt in his expression. This was who Lucien Hahn was. Not the man who'd held her gently in the night, or listened to her stories about Detroit, or promised to help her rebuild her life. This was the crime lord who ruled through calculated violence and strategic fear, and she'd been naive enough to think love could change that. "I need air," she said. She got out of the car before Lucien could stop her, walking toward the parking garage's exit. Her legs felt unsteady. Everything felt unsteady. Behind her, she heard Jin-ho say something in Korean. Lucien's response was too quiet to catch. Lyra made it to the garage entrance before her knees gave out. She sat on the concrete, back against the wall, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 3 hours. The gunfight, the ledge, Victor falling, Damien still trapped. Her hands were shaking again. Footsteps approached. Lucien sat down beside her without asking permission. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "My mother died when I was 17, he said finally. "Cancer. The kind that takes its time. The kind where you watch someone you love disappear piece by piece until there's nothing left but pain." Lyra stayed quiet. "She made me promise something before she died," Lucien continued. "Said that when someone reaches for help, you don't turn away. Doesn't matter who they are or what it costs. You help because that's what separates people from monsters." Sounds like a good woman. She was. Better than my father ever deserved. Better than I deserved. His voice was rough now. "I've tried to keep that promise. For 15 years I've tried, but every time I help someone it costs something. Tonight it cost Victor's life and his sister's innocence and Damien's freedom. Maybe his life too." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know how to do this anymore." Lucien looked at her. "I don't know how to be the person my mother wanted me to be while surviving in the world my father left me. Those two things don't fit together. Maybe they're not supposed to. Then what am I supposed to do?" Lyra didn't have an answer. They sat in silence while Seoul's distant traffic hummed beyond the parking garage. Victor's sister was crying softly in the car. Jin-ho was making quiet phone calls, probably arranging their next move. Everything had gone so wrong, so fast. "I need to tell you something," Lucien said. "About tonight." Something in his tone made Lyra's stomach clench. "What?" "Victor wasn't working alone." "What do you mean?" "I mean, someone inside my organization has been feeding him information." Lucien's hands curled into fists. That's how he knew about the panic room's location, how he knew which building security to bribe, how he knew exactly when to move. "You have a traitor." "Yes." "Do you know who?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I have suspicions." "Tell me." "Not yet. Not until I'm sure." But there was something in his expression that made Lyra's blood run cold, a weight behind his eyes that suggested the betrayal wasn't just tactical, it was personal. Her phone buzzed. Not the burner. Her real phone, the one she hadn't looked at in days. She pulled it out and her heart stopped. The screen showed a text from an unknown number. It was a video file. She pressed play. The footage was grainy, clearly from a security camera. It showed a parking garage, not the one they were in now, but one she recognized. The garage beneath Lucien's building, 2 nights ago. In the video, a figure approached Lucien's car. The angle was bad, but the body language was clear. They were placing something underneath. A tracker, probably. The figure turned slightly as they worked. Lyra's breath caught. It was Jin-ho. She looked up. Jin-ho stood 20 feet away with his back to them, still on his phone. Still making calls. Still playing the loyal soldier. "Lucien," Lyra whispered. He looked at her phone, watched the video. She saw the moment understanding hit him. The way his entire body went rigid. The way his hand drifted toward the gun under his jacket. "How long have you had this?" he asked quietly. "It just came. I don't know who sent it." "When was it filmed?" 2 nights ago, right after we—" Lyra stopped. "Right after we slept together, right after everything changed." Lucien stood slowly. His expression had gone completely blank, which was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. "Stay here," he said. "Lucien, wait." But he was already walking toward Jin-ho. Jin-ho turned as Lucien approached, smiled, said something in Korean that sounded casual, friendly. Lucien shot him. The sound echoed through the parking garage like a thunderclap. Jin-ho went down hard, blood spreading across the concrete. Not dead. Lucien had aimed for the leg, but screaming. Victor's sister screamed too. Lucien stood over Jin-ho with the gun pointed at his head and spoke in English so Lyra could understand. "How long?" Jin-ho's face was twisted in pain. "Boss, Don't lie to me." Lucien's voice was ice. "I just watched you plant a tracker on my car. So I'm going to ask you one more time. How long have you been working with Victor? 6 months, Jin-ho gasped. Since he first approached me. He offered triple what you pay. Said when he took over I'd be his second. Why did you help me tonight then? Because Victor was supposed to kill you at the restaurant, not her. When that failed, I was supposed to finish the job here. Jin-ho laughed bitterly. But I waited too long, got soft, and now… Lucian shot him again. This time Jin-ho stopped moving. The silence that followed was absolute. Lyra couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she'd just watched. A man she'd trusted, who'd driven her to the Golden Phoenix, who'd saved her life on the fire escape, lying dead on concrete because Lucian had pulled a trigger with the same casual efficiency someone else might use to close a door. We need to move, Lucian said. His voice was steady, controlled, like he hadn't just executed someone. Jin-ho was right about one thing. This location is compromised. You killed him. Yes. He saved my life tonight. He was also planning to kill us both. Lucian turned to face her. That's how this works, Lyra. That's what I've been trying to tell you. In my world, you don't get second chances. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. You're loyal or you're dead. And that's supposed to make this okay. It's supposed to help you survive. Lyra looked at Jin-ho's body, at the blood pooling beneath him, at the way his eyes stared at nothing. 20 minutes ago, he'd been making phone calls, helping them escape, playing his part perfectly. Now he was dead because a video had arrived at exactly the right moment to expose him, or the wrong moment. Who sent me that video? Lyra asked slowly. Lucian went very still. What? The video. It came from an unknown number. Someone wanted me to see Jin-ho planting that tracker. Someone timed it perfectly to arrive right now. She looked at him. Who else knew we were here? Nobody? Then how? Lyra's phone buzzed again. Another text. Same unknown number. This time it was just words. You're welcome, now run. Her blood turned to ice. Lucienne, she said carefully, I think we're being played. By who? I don't… The parking garage's lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed them. Lyra heard Victor's sister scream, heard Lucienne curse in Korean, heard the distinctive sound of a gun being readied. Then lights flooded the garage from multiple directions. Car headlights, blinding, trapping them in intersecting beams. Lucian grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her behind a concrete pillar. She could feel his heartbeat through his grip. Fast, controlled, but definitely elevated. How many? She whispered. At least 6 vehicles. Maybe more. Victor's people? Probably. Someone must have followed Jin-ho's tracker before we found it. Or someone called them here. Lucian didn't respond to that. A voice echoed through the garage, male, Korean, speaking English for their benefit. Lucienne Hahn. You killed Victor Hahn. You killed Jin-ho Park. You kidnapped Miss Han. These crimes cannot stand. Show yourself, Lucienne called back. You're not in a position to make demands. Neither are you. You wanted me dead. You would have opened fire already. Silence. Then footsteps. A man emerged from behind one of the cars, hands raised to show he was unarmed. 50s. Expensive suit. Face Lyra had never seen before. My name is Director Kang, the man said. Seoul Metropolitan Police, Anti-Organized Crime Unit. Lyra's stomach dropped. Police. Not Victor's men. Police. You're under arrest, Director Kang continued. Both of you. For murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, and about 20 other charges I'll think of on the drive to the station. Lucian's grip on her arm tightened. You can't prove any of that. I have Jin-ho's body with your bullets in it. I have Victor's sister as a witness to her kidnapping. I have security footage from the Golden Phoenix showing you giving orders, and I have Jin-ho's phone records showing he was my informant for the last 6 months. The world tilted sideways. Jin-ho, working for the police, not Victor. Which meant everything he'd done tonight, driving Lyra to the restaurant, providing cover fire, helping them escape, had been orchestrated, documented, building a case, and Lucian had killed him. Your informant was also working with Victor, Lyra said desperately. We have proof. The video? Director Kang smiled. The one from the unknown number? That was us. We sent it to create exactly this situation, force Lucien to make a mistake. He gestured at Jinho's body, which he did, on camera, in front of witnesses. Lyra looked around, noticed the small red lights on several of the cars, recording equipment. They'd been set up. Every step of tonight had been choreographed to force Lucien into a position where he'd have to kill someone on camera. Jinho had been the bait, the sacrifice, and it had worked perfectly. "Lucien," she whispered, "we need to run." "There's nowhere to run. There's always No." His voice was final. "This is where it ends." He stepped out from behind the pillar, hands raised. "I'm coming out," he called. "Don't shoot. I surrender." "Lucien, no. Take care of yourself," he said quietly, looking at her one last time, "and get as far from this world as you can." Then he walked into the light. Police swarmed him immediately, hands behind his back, gun taken, down on his knees, the whole brutal choreography of arrest. Director Kang turned his attention to Lyra. "Miss Vale, you're also under arrest, but I'm willing to make a deal. Testify against Lucien Hahn. Tell us everything you know about his organization. And maybe you walk away from this with just a deportation instead of 20 years in a Korean prison." Lyra stood frozen. Behind Director Kang, she could see Lucien on his knees, hands cuffed, surrounded by police. He wasn't looking at her, just staring straight ahead with that same blank expression he'd worn when he shot Jinho. This was it. The moment where she chose, testify against him and save herself, or stay loyal and burn with him. 20 feet away, Victor's sister was crying hysterically as police tried to calm her down. Somewhere in Seoul, Damien was either dead or being cut loose by Victor's remaining men, and Lyra stood in a parking garage making a choice that would define the rest of her life. "I need time to think," she said. Director Kang smiled. "You have until we reach the station. After that, the offer expires." They put her in handcuffs too, led her to a separate car from Lucien. She caught one last glimpse of him through the window as they drove away. His face expressionless, his body still, already looking like he belonged behind bars. Like this was where he'd always been heading. And maybe it was. Maybe people like Lucien didn't get happy endings. Maybe the world didn't work that way. Maybe the best you could hope for was surviving long enough to regret all the choices that brought you here. Lyra leaned her head against the cold car window and watched Seoul blur past. Somewhere in this city was the woman she used to be. The medical researcher who wanted to understand broken systems. The girl from Detroit who believed she could make things better. That woman felt like a stranger now. Because the woman sitting in this police car, hands cuffed, facing 20 years in prison or a deal that required betraying the only person who'd shown her genuine care in years. That woman understood exactly how systems broke, from the inside out, one compromise at a time. The interrogation room smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow-green that made Lyra's eyes ache. She'd been sitting in the metal chair for 3 hours. No water, no bathroom break, just her and the handcuffs and the mounting pressure in her bladder that was probably intentional. Director Kang sat across from her looking fresh as morning despite the late hour. Beside him was a younger detective whose name Lyra hadn't caught. A recording device sat between them, red light glowing. "Let's try this again," Kang said. His English was precise, clinical. "Tell me about Lucien Huan's organization." "I don't know anything about it." "You lived in his penthouse for a week." 5 days. 5 days, then? You expect me to believe he never discussed business? Never made phone calls? Never had meetings? He made calls in Korean. I don't speak Korean. Convenient. Kang leaned forward. "Miss Vale, I'm trying to help you, but I can only do that if you help me." "By testifying against someone who saved my life?" "Saved your life?" The younger detective laughed. "He got you arrested, got you facing kidnapping charges, got you complicit in multiple murders. That's not saving, that's destroying." Lyra's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to hide it. "I want a lawyer. You're not a Korean citizen. You're not entitled to a lawyer until we formally charge you. Right now, this is just a conversation." "Then I'm done conversing." Kang sighed, opened a folder and pulled out photographs. Crime scene shots, Jinho's body, Victor's broken form on the pavement, blood and bodies and evidence that painted a picture of absolute carnage. "This is what your lover does," Kang said quietly. "This is the man you're protecting. Look at these photos and tell me he deserves your loyalty." Lyra looked, forced herself to really see what she'd been part of. The violence, the waste, the casual way Lucien had pulled a trigger and ended a life. But she also remembered the way he'd held her in the rain, the promise he'd made to his dying mother, the genuine fear in his eyes when bullets started flying. "Where is he?" she asked. "In a cell, where he belongs. I want to see him." "That's not how this works." "Then charge me or let me go." Kang studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded to the younger detective who left the room. When the door opened, Lyra caught a glimpse of activity outside. Other cops, phones ringing, the organized chaos of a police station at night. "You're making a mistake," Kang said once they were alone. "Lucien Juan doesn't love you. Men like him don't love. They possess, they use, and when you're no longer useful, they discard. You don't know him. I've been tracking him for 4 years. I know him better than you ever will." "Then you know about his mother, about the promise." That surprised Kang. His eyebrows rose fractionally. "He told you about that?" "Yes." "And you believed him?" "Why wouldn't I?" Kang laughed without humor. "Because it's a story, Miss Vale. A carefully constructed narrative designed to make him seem human, make him relatable. Every criminal I've ever met has one. The sob story, the tragic past, the one piece of goodness they cling to so they can sleep at night." "You think he made it up?" "I think he told you exactly what you needed to hear to make you trust him." Kang closed the folder. His mother did die when he was 17. That part's true. But the promise? The helping people? That's marketing, and you bought it. Lyra's stomach twisted, because part of her, the part that had spent 2 years learning to recognize manipulation, was whispering that Kang might be right. The door opened again. The younger detective returned with another folder. "We found something," he said in Korean. Kang took the folder, read. His expression shifted into something that might have been satisfaction. "What?" Lyra asked. Kang turned his laptop around. On the screen was surveillance footage from the Golden Phoenix, time-stamped from earlier tonight. The image quality was grainy but clear enough. It showed Damien, alive, walking out of the restaurant under his own power, flanked by 2 men in suits, no longer bound, no longer bleeding, moving like someone who'd just concluded a business transaction. "Your ex-boyfriend," Kang said, "the one you risked everything to save. Want to know where he went after this footage was taken?" Lyra couldn't speak. Kang clicked to another video. Different location, a parking garage. Damien getting into a luxury car. And standing beside that car, holding the door open like a chauffeur, another man in a suit, older, Korean. The frame shifted and Lyra's breath stopped. It was the same garage from the video Jin-ho had planted the tracker in. Same angle, same camera, which meant whoever had sent her that video had access to all the building's security footage, including footage they'd deliberately withheld until now. "Damien Cross has been working with us for 6 weeks, Kang said quietly, ever since we approached him about his visa violations. We offered him immunity and a path to permanent residency in exchange for information about Lucien Juan." The room tilted sideways. "He gave us everything, how you met Lucien, where you were staying, your routines. He even volunteered to be bait tonight, said it would be poetic justice. You'd try to save him and we'd have proof of your complicity in Lucien's organization." Lyra couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her brain was trying to process too many betrayals at once. Damien, working with police, using her escape as an opportunity to destroy the man who'd helped her. The bruises? She managed. Makeup? The zip ties? Stage props? The entire hostage situation was theater designed to force Lucien's hand. Kang's voice was almost gentle now. "You were never saving Damien, Miss Vale. You were walking into a trap he helped build." Lyra's hands curled into fists on the table. 2 years. 2 years of abuse and control and systematic destruction. And when she'd finally escaped, Damien had found a way to weaponize even that. "Where is he now?" Her voice came out flat. "Dead. In protective custody, he'll testify at trial." "And if I don't testify?" Then he's our only witness. And his story is that you were Lucy Yen's girlfriend, that you willingly participated in everything, that you helped plan Victor's murder and Jinho's execution. Kang paused. But if you testify first, tell your side of the story, explain how Lucian manipulated you, then you become the victim instead of the accomplice. Lyra looked at the photo of Jinho's body, at the blood spreading across concrete, at the life Lucian had ended without hesitation. I need to see him, she said, face to face. Then I'll decide. Kang considered this, finally nodded. 10 minutes. Supervised. And Miss Vale? He waited until she met his eyes. Think very carefully about what loyalty is worth. Because the man you're protecting, he wouldn't hesitate to throw you away if the situation were reversed. They led her through the station in handcuffs. Cops stared, whispered. She was a spectacle now. The foreign woman who'd gotten tangled up with Seoul's most notorious crime lord. The holding cells were in the basement, concrete walls, metal bars, the smell of human misery. They walked past several cells occupied by men in various states of despair before stopping at the last one. Lucian sat on a narrow bench, forearms resting on his knees, staring at nothing. He'd been cleaned up, the blood washed away, torn clothes replaced with a gray prisoner's uniform. But his face was a map of damage. Split lip, bruised jaw, one eye swollen nearly shut. They'd worked him over, not enough to be called torture, just enough to make a point. He looked up when they approached, gray eyes finding hers through the bars. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or fear, or just exhaustion. 5 minutes, the guard said, unlocking a small consultation room adjacent to the cell. They put Lyra inside and brought Lucian in after, cuffing him to a metal ring bolted to the table. Then they left, locking the door behind them. Glass windows showed guards watching from outside, cameras in the corners. Nothing private about this conversation. You're hurt, Lucian said. So are you. They wanted to know about my organization. I told them to fuck themselves in 3 languages. Despite everything, Lyra almost smiled. That's stupid. Probably. He leaned back as far as the cuffs allowed. They offer you a deal? Yes. You should take it. Just like that? Just like that. His voice was matter of fact. Testify. Say I manipulated you. Say I threatened you. Whatever they need to hear. Get yourself deported instead of imprisoned. And you? I was always going to end up here eventually. At least this way one of us walks away. Lyra studied his face, looking for the lie, the manipulation, the carefully constructed narrative Kang had warned her about. All she saw was exhaustion. Damien was working with them, she said. The whole hostage thing was fake. He set us up. Lucian's jaw tightened. I know. You know? I figured it out about an hour ago. Jinho being a police informant didn't make sense. He was too good at his job, too trusted. Then I realized he wasn't Victor's plant. He was theirs. And the only way they knew to target you specifically was if someone gave them the information. So you knew I walked into a trap. Not until it was too late. You could have told me. When? While we were running for our lives? While you were hanging off a fire escape? While I was shooting a man I'd trusted for 3 years? His voice cracked slightly. There wasn't a good time for that conversation. Lyra's anger deflated slightly. Because he was right. Everything had moved too fast, too chaotic. By the time any of them understood what was really happening, they were already in the trap. Kang says you don't love me, she said. Says the story about your mother is just marketing, that you manipulated me from the start. Lucian was quiet for a long time. Maybe he's right, he said finally. That hurt worse than she'd expected. Maybe I did manipulate you, Lucian continued. Maybe keeping you close was always about proving something to myself. That I could keep my mother's promise, that I wasn't completely lost. He looked at her. But the part where I fell in love with you, that wasn't strategy. That was just stupid. Why stupid? Because love is a weakness in my world. And Victor proved that the second he kicked in my door. Lucien's hands curled into fists on the table. Kang's right about one thing. Men like me don't get happy endings. We get cells or bullets or worse. And anyone stupid enough to love us gets dragged down too. So you're saying I should testify? I'm saying you should save yourself by destroying you. I'm already destroyed. Have been since I was 17 and watched my mother die and inherited my father's empire. You're just late to realize it. Lyra wanted to scream at him, wanted to grab him and shake him, and demand he fight back instead of just accepting this ending like it was inevitable. But looking at him now, battered, cuffed, already looking like he belonged behind bars, she wondered if maybe he'd been right all along. Maybe some people were just meant to burn. I have a question, she said. All right. That first night, in the rain, if you could go back and walk away instead of helping me, would you? Lucien didn't hesitate. No. Why not? Because for 5 years I've been asking myself if my mother's promise was worth keeping, if helping people made any difference in a world this broken. And then you appeared and gave me an answer. What answer? That maybe one person is enough. His voice was rough now. Maybe saving one person from the rain is worth everything that came after. Even this. Lyra's throat closed up. The door opened. Director Kang stood in the entrance. Time's up. Wait, Lyra started. You've had your conversation. Now it's time to make a choice. Kang's expression was implacable. Testify or don't, but decide now. Lyra looked at Lucien one last time, at the man who'd saved her from Damien, who'd given her back pieces of herself she'd thought were lost, who'd killed for her and died for her and was sitting here telling her to betray him. She stood up. I'll testify, she said. Lucien's expression didn't change, just nodded once like he'd expected nothing else. Smart choice, Kang said. They led her back upstairs to a different room, nicer furniture. Coffee that didn't taste like industrial runoff. A stenographer to record her statement. Kang sat across from her with a fresh legal pad and an expression that suggested he'd won something. Start from the beginning, he said. The night you met Lucien Hahn. Lyra took a breath. I met him in the rain, she began. I was running from my abusive ex-boyfriend, Damien Cross. I grabbed the first person I saw and begged him to pretend he knew me. And that person was Lucien Hahn. Yes. What happened next? Lyra told them everything. The penthouse, the panic room, Victor's betrayal, the Golden Phoenix, Jinho's death. She laid it all out in clinical detail, watching Kang's pen move across paper, building the case that would destroy Lucien completely. Except she changed one detail. A small thing. Barely noticeable. She said Lucien had shot Jinho in self-defense, that Jinho had drawn first, that it happened so fast she couldn't be sure who'd moved when. It wasn't much. Probably wouldn't matter in the end. But it was something. 3 hours later, they were done. Lyra signed the statement with shaking hands. Kang looked satisfied in the way predators looked when they'd finally cornered prey. Good, he said. This will be enough to put Lucien away for 20 years minimum, possibly life. And me? Deportation. You'll be on a plane to Detroit by Friday. Your visa's already been revoked. You're done in Korea. Done in Korea. Done with Lucien. Done with the entire nightmare that started when she'd grabbed a stranger in the rain. Can I see him again? She asked. No, you're a witness now. Contact is prohibited. Just for a minute, please. Kang studied her, finally sighed. 2 minutes, supervised. And Miss Vale, don't do anything stupid. They brought her back down to the cells. Lucien was lying on the bench now, one arm over his eyes, looking like he'd finally given up on consciousness. You have a visitor, the guard said. Lucien sat up, saw her. His expression flickered through confusion, surprise, resignation. I testified, Lyra said through the bars. I know. They're deporting me. Good. Stop saying that. Her voice cracked. Stop acting like this is fine. Like you getting locked up for 20 years is just how things were always going to end. It is how things were always going to end. No, you chose this. You chose to help me that night. Chose to let me stay. Chose to... She stopped. Too many guards listening. Too many cameras recording. Lucien stood and crossed to the bars. They were close now. Close enough to touch, if not for the metal between them. I need you to understand something, he said quietly. These last 5 days with you? They're the only time in 15 years I felt like something other than what my father made me. So yeah, 20 years in prison sounds bad, but 5 days of being human? That's worth it. Lucien, Go home, Lyra. Go back to Detroit. Finish your research. Help people the right way. The way my mother wanted to help people. And don't look back at this. How am I supposed to just forget? You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think. The guard was approaching, time running out. I'm sorry, Lyra whispered. Don't be. Lucien pressed his palm against the bars. After a moment, Lyra pressed hers against the other side, as close to touching as they could get. Go be the person you were supposed to become. Before Damien, before me, before all of this. Promise me. I promise. The guard grabbed her arm. Time's up. They pulled her away. She looked back once as they led her down the corridor. Lucien stood at the bars watching her go with an expression that looked almost like peace. Then she turned the corner and he disappeared. They processed her out 2 hours later, took her passport, gave her a plane ticket, told her she had 48 hours to collect her belongings and leave Korea. If she tried to contact Lucien or interfere with the investigation, they'd charge her as an accomplice. She agreed to everything. They released her at dawn. Seoul was waking up. Vendors opening shops, commuters heading to subways, the city moving forward like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Lyra stood outside the police station trying to figure out where to go. The penthouse was a crime scene. She had no money except what was in her bank account, no friends, no support system, nothing except a plane ticket and 48 hours to vanish. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. She almost didn't answer. Then curiosity won. Hello? Miss Vale? The voice was female, older, speaking English with a British accent. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm an attorney. I represent certain parties with an interest in Lucien Huan's case. I already testified. I know. I'm calling to offer you alternative options. What kind of options? The kind where Lucien doesn't spend 20 years in prison. The kind where you don't get deported. The kind where Damien Cross faces consequences for his actions. A pause. Are you interested? Lyra's heart hammered. How? Not over the phone. There's a cafe 3 blocks from the station. The Morning Glory. Meet me there in 30 minutes. Come alone. The line went dead. Lyra stood there holding her phone, every instinct screaming that this was another trap, another manipulation, another person trying to use her as a piece in games she didn't understand. But the alternative was getting on a plane Friday and leaving Lucien to rot. She started walking. The Morning Glory was exactly the kind of place someone would pick for a clandestine meeting. Small, crowded, noisy enough that conversations disappeared into ambient sound. Lyra found an empty table near the back and ordered coffee she didn't drink. Margaret Chen arrived exactly 30 minutes later. 50s. Expensive suit. The kind of face that looked pleasant until you noticed the intelligence in her eyes. She sat down without asking permission. You look exhausted, she observed. I've had a long night. I imagine so. Chen ordered tea from a passing waitress. Let me be direct. I represent a coalition of business interests who benefit from stability in Seoul's underground economy. Lucien provides that stability. Victor Hahn did not. Victor's death should have been the end of it. Instead, the police have turned it into a circus. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the key witness. Your testimony is what makes their case. Without you, they have circumstantial evidence and hearsay. I already testified. Testimonies can be recanted. Lyra stared at her. You want me to lie? I want you to tell a different truth. One where Jin Ho drew his weapon first, where Lucien acted in self-defense, where everything that happened was a tragedy, not a crime. That's still lying, is it? Chen's expression was mild. You said yourself in your statement that it happened too fast to be sure. That's not lying. That's honest uncertainty. The police will never believe. The police will have no choice but to accept reasonable doubt. And in Korean courts, reasonable doubt matters. Chen leaned forward. Here's what I'm offering. Recant your testimony. Claim you were coerced. I'll provide legal representation for both you and Lucien. My firm has resources the public defender's office doesn't. Connections, leverage. And in exchange, you stay in Korea. We fix your visa situation, help you get back into your graduate program. Lucien serves maybe 5 years instead of 20. Everyone wins. Except Damien. Chen smiled. It was the coldest expression Lyra had ever seen. Oh no, Damien loses quite significantly. See, he committed perjury, filed false police reports, wasted police resources. Once your recantation exposes his lies, he'll be facing charges of his own. And unlike you, he won't have expensive lawyers protecting him. Lyra's coffee was cold now. She wrapped her hands around the cup anyway, needing something solid to hold on to. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You don't know me." "I don't need to know you. I know Lucien. He's reliable, controlled, the kind of leader who keeps violence surgical instead of chaotic. Replacing him creates a power vacuum. Power vacuums create war. War is bad for business." Chen's expression softened slightly. "But I'll be honest, Miss Vale. The coalition voted 3-2 on this approach. Half of them think we should let Lucien rot and find a new partner. I'm only here because I believe stability is worth the investment." "So this isn't about helping him. It's about protecting your profits." "Everything is about profits. The question is whether you can live with being part of that equation." Lyra thought about Lucien in that cell. About 20 years versus 5. About going back to Detroit with nothing, or staying in Seoul with a chance. About what kind of person accepted help from criminals to save a criminal. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I want something else." "Name it." "I want to see Damien, face to face, before he gets arrested, before lawyers get involved, just 5 minutes. Chen studied her. "May I ask why?" "Because I spent 2 years afraid of him, and I want him to see what I became when I stopped being afraid." A slow smile spread across Chen's face. "I think we're going to get along just fine, Miss Vale." They made the arrangements in whispers over cooling beverages. Chen provided a burner phone with a single number programmed in. Lyra was to call when she was ready. The meeting with Damien would happen tonight. The recantation would happen tomorrow. After that, Chen promised, everything would change. Lyra spent the day in a cheap hotel room trying to sleep and failing. Her mind kept circling back to choices and consequences. To the woman she'd been when she grabbed Lucien in the rain versus who she was now. That woman had been running. This woman was about to walk straight into fire. Night fell. Lyra called the number. "Ready?" Chen's voice asked. "Yes." "There's a car outside your hotel. Get in." The car was black. Expensive. Driven by someone who didn't speak. They drove for 20 minutes through Seoul's nighttime streets before pulling into an underground parking garage Lyra didn't recognize. Chen waited beside an elevator. "He's upstairs," she said. "Penthouse. Protective custody just means expensive hotels for cooperative witnesses." "Are you coming?" "No. This conversation is yours alone." Chen handed her a key card. "You have 15 minutes before his police escort checks on him. After that, we need to be gone." Lyra took the key card, rode the elevator up, stood outside the penthouse door trying to calm her breathing. Then she knocked. Damien opened the door looking healthy, relaxed, comfortable. Like this was just another business trip, like he hadn't orchestrated the destruction of multiple lives. He saw her and smiled. "Lyra, I was wondering if you'd show up." She stepped inside without being invited. The penthouse was nice, not as nice as Lucien's, but close. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive furniture, the kind of place police probably thought was adequate for a cooperating witness. "You set me up," Lyra said. "I gave the police information. That's not the same thing." "You pretended to be kidnapped. You let me think I was saving you. I gave you an opportunity to be a hero. Not my fault you fucked it up." Damien poured himself a drink. Didn't offer her one. "You want to know the funny part? I actually tried to let you go. That night in the rain, I was going to walk away. Then that bastard had to play knight in shining armor." "So you got him arrested out of spite?" "I got him arrested because he's a criminal and you're better off without him." Damien's voice took on that reasonable tone she'd learned to hate. "Come on, Lyra. You had to know it would end like this. Guys like Lucien don't get happy endings. They get cells or body bags. I just accelerated the timeline." Lyra stepped closer. "And what do you get? Permanent residency, clean record, and the satisfaction of knowing you'll be gone by Friday." He smiled. "It's almost poetic. You tried to escape me and ended up right back where you started. Alone, broken. Exactly what you've always been." That should have hurt. 2 years ago, it would have destroyed her. But standing there looking at Damien's self-satisfied expression, Lyra felt nothing except cold clarity. "You're right," she said quietly. "Guys like Lucien don't get happy endings. Finally you see sense. But neither do you." Damien's smile faltered. "What?" "I'm recanting my testimony. Tomorrow morning. Going to tell the police I was coerced, that I was confused, that everything I said was influenced by exhaustion and fear and pressure. They'll never believe. They'll have to consider reasonable doubt. And reasonable doubt means Lucien walks, or at least gets a reduced sentence." Lyra stepped closer. "But you? You filed false reports, committed perjury, wasted police resources. When my recantation exposes that, you're the one going to prison." Damien's face went pale. "You're bluffing, am I? You spent 2 years teaching me to lie, teaching me to perform, teaching me to be whoever I needed to be to survive." She smiled. "Congratulations, I learned. They'll deport you. Maybe. Or maybe the expensive lawyers I've retained will fix my visa issues. Either way, I won't be your victim anymore." Damien's hand moved toward his phone. Lyra grabbed it first, threw it across the room where it shattered against the wall. "You're insane," Damien breathed. "No, I'm done being afraid." Lyra headed for the door, stopped, looked back. "Oh, and Damien, that police escort you have? He's outside for another 8 minutes. After that, you're on your own. And a lot of people in this city are very unhappy with how you've been cooperating with police." She left him standing there trying to process the threat. Rode the elevator down where Chen waited with that same cold smile. "How do you feel?" Chen asked. "Like I just burned the last bridge back to who I used to be." "Good. That person would have gotten you killed." They drove through Seoul's midnight streets in silence. Lyra watched the city slide past and wondered what version of herself would emerge from the ashes of the last 5 days. Not the woman who'd run from Damien. Not the woman who'd grabbed Lucien in the rain. Someone new, someone harder. Someone who understood that surviving meant making choices that would have horrified her a week ago. Tomorrow, she'd recant her testimony. Tomorrow, she'd become the thing she'd tried so hard not to be. But tonight, driving through Seoul with criminals and lawyers, and the kind of people who fixed problems with money and violence, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. She felt powerful. And that terrified her more than anything else. The courtroom smelled like old wood and institutional despair. Lyra sat in the witness box with her hands folded in her lap, trying to look like someone who'd made an honest mistake, instead of someone orchestrating a careful dismantling of her previous testimony. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie humans were capable of telling, watched her with clinical detachment. Director Kang stood at the prosecutor's table, looking like a man who'd just watched his career catch fire. "Miss Vale," the judge said in careful English, "you understand that recanting testimony is a serious matter." "Yes, Your Honor." "And you maintain that your original statement was given under duress." "Not duress exactly." Lyra's voice was steady. She'd practiced this for hours with Margaret Chen. "I was exhausted, traumatized. I just witnessed multiple acts of violence. When Director Kang questioned me, I was in shock. I said things I thought he wanted to hear because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid I'd be charged as an accomplice. Afraid I'd never see my home again. Afraid of—" She paused. Let her voice crack slightly. "Afraid of everything." The judge made notes. "And now? Are you still afraid?" "Now I've had time to process what happened, to remember things more clearly. And I realized that some of what I said was wrong." "Specifically?" "Jinho Park. In my original statement I said Lucien Huan shot him without provocation, but that's not accurate. Jinho drew his weapon first. Lucien was defending himself." Kang stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is clearly—" "Sit down, Director." The judge's tone was ice. "You'll have your turn." Kang sat. His jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "Continue, Miss Vale," the judge said. Everything happened so fast. The parking garage, the police arriving, Jinho getting shot. I was terrified and confused, and when Director Kang asked me to describe what happened, I got the sequence wrong. Lyra met the judge's eyes. "I'm not saying Lucien is innocent. I'm saying I may have misrepresented the circumstances of Jinho's death. May have or did? Did. I did misrepresent them because I was scared and I wanted to cooperate, and I thought telling Director Kang what he wanted to hear would keep me safe. The judge studied her for a long moment. Then she looked at Kang. Director, you have questions? Kang approached the witness box like a man approaching a snake. Miss Vale, is it true that yesterday you met with Margaret Chen, an attorney known for representing organized crime figures? Chen stood from the defense table. Objection. My client list is irrelevant to... I'm establishing motive for the witness's recantation, Kang interrupted. Overruled, the judge said. Answer the question, Miss Vale. Yes, Lyra said. I met with Ms. Chen. And did she offer you anything in exchange for changing your testimony? She offered me legal representation, which I need considering I'm facing deportation. Did she offer to fix your visa problems? She said her firm could help navigate the legal process. That's not the same as fixing anything. Did she mention that keeping Lucian Huan out of prison would benefit certain business interests in Seoul? Lyra's heart hammered, but her voice stayed level. No. She mentioned that I had legal options I might not be aware of, that's all. Kang's expression suggested he knew she was lying, but couldn't prove it. Miss Vale, you spent 5 days living with a known criminal. You witnessed multiple acts of violence. You were present when Victor Hahn died. Are you really asking this court to believe you just happened to misremember crucial details? I'm asking this court to acknowledge that trauma affects memory, that being questioned for hours without legal counsel affects judgment, that I was a terrified woman trying to survive and I made mistakes. Convenient mistakes that benefit the man you claim to love. I never claimed to love him, Lyra said quietly. I said he helped me escape an abusive situation. That's not the same thing. But you did develop feelings for him. I developed gratitude, respect, maybe affection. But Director Kang, if you're asking whether those feelings would make me commit perjury, the answer is no. I'm recanting because my original testimony was inaccurate, not because I'm trying to save anyone. It was a good lie, clean, simple, wrapped in just enough truth to be believable. The judge clearly didn't believe a word of it, but that didn't matter. What mattered was reasonable doubt. And Lyra had just created enough of it to make Lucian's self-defense argument plausible. Anything else, Director? The judge asked. Kang looked like he wanted to scream. Instead, he said, No, Your Honor. Miss Vale, you're dismissed. But understand this. If I discover you've committed perjury in either your original testimony or this recantation, I will pursue charges to the fullest extent of Korean law. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Then we're adjourned. I'll render my decision on Mr. Huan's bail hearing tomorrow morning. The gavel came down like a gunshot. Chen met Lyra outside the courtroom with an expression that might have been satisfaction or just professional competence. Well done, she said quietly. Did it work? The judge will grant bail. She has to now. Reasonable doubt means Lucian's not a flight risk for first-degree murder. He'll still face charges, but nothing that requires pretrial detention. And Damien? Chen's smile was cold. Damien Cross was arrested this morning. Perjury, filing false reports, obstruction of justice. His lawyer is a public defender who graduated law school 6 months ago. He's looking at 3 to 5 years. Lyra should have felt triumph, victory. The man who terrorized her for 2 years was finally facing consequences. Instead, she just felt empty. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait for bail to be posted. Lucien will be released by tonight. Then we begin preparing for trial. How long will that take? 8 months, maybe a year. Korean courts move slowly, but with your recantation and our resources, we'll negotiate it down to manslaughter. 5 years suspended sentence, probation, heavy fines. He'll be effectively retired from his previous business interests, but he'll be free. And me? Your visa gets sorted this week. We'll get you a student visa sponsored through your graduate program. You can stay in Korea as long as you're enrolled. Chen paused. After that, it's up to you whether you want to maintain contact with Lucien or cut ties completely. My firm's job ends when his trial does. Lyra nodded, tried to process what freedom looked like now, what staying in Seoul meant, what kind of person she'd become in the process of surviving the last 6 days. Can I see him? She asked. When he gets out? That's not advisable. You're still technically witnesses in each other's cases. I don't care about advisable. Can I see him? Chen studied her, finally sighed. He'll be released from Seoul Detention Center around 8 p.m. If you happen to be in that area at that time, I couldn't stop you from a chance encounter. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Miss Vale. You're about to discover that winning sometimes feels a lot like losing. Chen was right. Lyra spent the afternoon in her hotel room trying to figure out what she'd say to Lucian when she saw him, trying to reconcile the woman who'd grabbed a stranger in the rain with the woman who'd just committed perjury to save him, trying to decide if those were even different people anymore. At 7 p.m., she took a cab to the detention center, waited outside in the gathering darkness while Seoul moved around her, couples holding hands, families heading to dinner, normal people living normal lives that didn't involve courtrooms and criminals, and choices that stained your soul. At 8:15, the main doors opened. Lucien emerged looking like someone who'd been hollowed out and not quite refilled. He'd lost weight. The bruises had faded to greenish-yellow shadows. He wore the same clothes he'd been arrested in 5 days ago, torn, blood-stained, wrong for someone walking free. He saw her and stopped. For a long moment, they just stood there on opposite sides of the sidewalk while people streamed past. Then Lucien crossed the distance slowly, like he wasn't sure she was real. You recanted, he said. Yes. Chen told me, said you saved my life. Chen saved your life. I just stopped making it worse. That's not how she described it. Chen's a lawyer. They're professionally obligated to lie. Lucien almost smiled. It looked wrong on his face after everything. Why did you do it? Because you were right. About your mother's promise. About one person being enough. Lyra's throat was tight. And because letting you rot for 20 years felt like letting Damien win. I'm done letting him win. Damien got arrested. I know. You did that too? Chen did that. I just stopped protecting him. That's not what I heard. I heard you visited him the night before your recantation. Had a conversation that scared him badly enough to try fleeing the country. Lyra didn't respond. What did you say to him? Lucien asked quietly. The truth. That he'd taught me too well. That the victim he'd spent 2 years creating had learned to bite back. She met his eyes. And that people in your world were very interested in his cooperation with police. You threatened him. I informed him of risks he might not have considered. Lyra, don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't tell me that was wrong. Don't tell me I shouldn't have. You don't get to judge the choices I made to survive. Lucien studied her face. You're different. Everything's different. I'm sorry. For what? For being the catalyst that turned you into someone who threatens people in hotel rooms. You didn't turn me into anything. I chose this. Every step. Lyra looked away. Maybe that's what surviving in your world means. Making choices that change you until the person you were doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe it means discovering who you always were underneath the fear. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you understand that you're not corrupted. You're just finally honest. They stood in silence for a moment. Seoul's night sounds filling the space between them. Traffic, voices, the city breathing. Chen says we shouldn't have contact, Lyra said finally. Until after your trial. Probably smart. I'm not good at smart anymore. Neither am I. Lucien looked at her like he was memorizing her face. Where are you staying? Hotel in Itaewon. You? I have a place in Gangnam. Not the penthouse. That's still a crime scene. Smaller apartment. Anonymous. The kind of place someone trying to disappear would use. Are you? Trying to disappear? I don't know yet. His voice was rough. Chen says I need to be retired from my previous business interests. That means giving up the organization, letting someone else take over, becoming a civilian. Can you do that? I've spent 15 years being what my father made me. I don't know what I am without it. He paused. But I know what I don't want to be anymore, and that's a start. Lyra wanted to touch him, wanted to close the distance and prove to herself he was real and alive and free. But something held her back. Some awareness that crossing that line now would make leaving later impossible. I should go, she said. Probably. Neither of them moved. Lucien? Yeah? I don't regret it. Any of it. Even the parts that broke me. His expression softened into something that looked almost like relief. Me neither. She walked away before she could change her mind, got in a cab and watched him disappear through the rear window, standing alone under Seoul's streetlights, looking like a man trying to figure out what freedom meant. She understood the feeling. The next 6 months passed in a strange kind of limbo. Lyra re-enrolled in her graduate program, dove into her research with the kind of intensity that came from needing distraction. She studied healthcare systems and community clinics, and all the ways broken structures could be rebuilt if someone cared enough to try. She didn't see Lucian. Chen's advice had been clear: no contact until after the trial. Anything else risked complications they couldn't afford. So Lyra focused on school and let the lawyers handle everything else. But she heard things. Seoul's expat community was small enough that gossip traveled. Lucien had stepped down from his organization, handed control to someone Chen's coalition had vetted and approved. He was living quietly in Gangnam. No bodyguards, no criminal enterprise, just a man with too much money and nothing to do with it. Some people said he was planning to leave Korea. Others said he was waiting for something. Lyra tried not to think about what that something might be. She saw Damien once, 3 months after his arrest. He was being transferred between facilities and their paths crossed in a courthouse hallway. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, the confidence and charm stripped away to reveal the petty cruelty underneath. He saw her and his expression twisted into something ugly. "Happy now?" he asked. "No," Lyra said honestly. "But I'm free. That's enough." He opened his mouth to respond, but guards pulled him away before he could. She watched him disappear down the corridor and felt nothing except a vague sense of closure. That chapter was over. The question was what chapter came next. The trial happened on a cold morning in November, 8 months after that night in the parking garage. 8 months of lawyers and negotiations and careful legal maneuvering. Lyra sat in the gallery wearing professional clothes that felt like armor. Lucien sat at the defense table looking composed and distant. They didn't acknowledge each other, couldn't under the circumstances. The proceedings were conducted mostly in Korean with periodic English translation. Lyra listened to Chen systematically dismantle the prosecution's case, watched Kang try to salvage something from the wreckage of his investigation, saw the judge's expression shift from skepticism to resignation as reasonable doubt piled up like snow. In the end, it took 3 hours. Manslaughter, suspended sentence, 5 years probation, community service, heavy fines that Lucien could pay without blinking. He walked out of the courtroom a free man. Kang looked like he wanted to set something on fire. Lyra waited until the courtroom emptied before approaching Chen in the hallway. "It's over?" she asked. "It's over. Lucien's legally obligated to check in with his probation officer monthly and perform 200 hours of community service annually. But yes, he's free. And me? Your visa is secure as long as you maintain student status. After graduation, you'll need to find other sponsorship, but that's years away." Chen's expression softened slightly. "You did well, Miss Vale. Most people don't survive what you survived. Fewer thrive afterward. I'm not sure I'm thriving. You're standing, you're breathing, you're moving forward. That's thriving in my world." Chen paused. "He's outside, if you want to talk to him." "Is that allowed now?" "The trial's over. You're both free to make your own choices." Chen smiled. "Though I'd advise against making any immediately. You've both been through trauma. Give yourselves time to process." "How much time?" "As long as it takes." Lyra found Lucien standing outside the courthouse steps, smoking a cigarette with the kind of intensity that suggested he'd picked up the habit recently. He saw her and stubbed it out. "Didn't know you smoked," she said. "Started in detention. Quitting now." He looked at her properly for the first time in 8 months. "You look good." "So do you." It wasn't entirely true. He looked tired, older, like the last year had aged him in ways time alone couldn't account for, but he also looked lighter somehow, less burdened. "Chen says I owe you for the suspended sentence," Lucien said. "You don't owe me anything. Your testimony made the difference." "My testimony fixed my original mistake. That's not the same as saving you." "Still." They stood in awkward silence, 8 months of distance creating a gulf neither knew how to cross. "What are you going to do now?" Lyra asked finally. "I don't know. Chen's coalition made it clear I'm retired from my previous line of work, so I need to figure out what comes next." He paused. "What about you?" "Finish my degree. Figure out what comes after. Try to remember who I was before Damien and you and all of this." "Think you can?" "No, but I can figure out who I am now. That might be enough." Lucien nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about something my mother said, before she died. She told me that people aren't defined by their worst moments. They're defined by what they do after." "What are you doing after?" "Still figuring that out. But I know I can't keep living like I'm waiting for violence to find me again. That's not living. That's just surviving." "And there's a difference?" "Yeah, there is." He looked at her. "You taught me that." Lyra's throat closed up. "I didn't teach you anything. You taught me that one person can be enough reason to change everything. That helping someone doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach for help in the rain." "Lucien's, I'm not asking for anything," he said quietly. "I know what we did to survive broke things that maybe can't be fixed. I just wanted you to know that whatever happens next, wherever you go, whatever you become, those 5 days with you were the most honest I've been since I was 17 years old." He started to walk away. "Wait," Lyra said. He stopped. "I'm not ready," she said, "for whatever this is. I need time to figure out who I am without fear or survival or any of it. I need to be alone for a while." "I understand. But maybe," she paused, took a breath, "maybe in a year, when I've finished my degree, when you figured out what retired looks like, maybe we could get coffee, like normal people, and see if whatever this is still exists without the violence." Lucien studied her face, then slowly, carefully, he smiled. "I'd like that. No promises." "No promises," he agreed. "Just coffee. Just coffee." He left then, walking into Seoul's afternoon crowds until he disappeared. Lyra watched him go and felt something shift inside her chest. Not closure exactly, but possibility. The future was uncertain, scary, full of questions she didn't have answers to, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, it was hers. 1 year later, Lyra graduated with honors and a thesis on community healthcare reform that her advisors called groundbreaking. She'd spent 12 months buried in research, interviews, and the kind of work that made her feel like maybe she could actually make a difference. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at loud noises, still carried scars from everything that happened, but she also laughed more, slept better, had friends who didn't know anything about her past except that she'd been through something difficult and survived it. On a Tuesday morning in November, exactly 1 year after Lucien's trial, she got a text from an unknown number. "Coffee?" Just that. One word. No explanation needed. She responded, "When?" "Now. If you're free. There's a place in Hongdae, the Morning Glory. Owner makes the best Americano in Seoul." Lyra smiled. The same cafe where Chen had made her offer. Coming full circle felt appropriate somehow. She got dressed, took the subway, walked into the Morning Glory expecting to feel nervous or anxious or uncertain. Instead, she just felt curious. Lucien sat at a corner table looking nothing like the crime lord who'd saved her in the rain. Casual clothes. Clean-shaven. No visible tattoos. He could have been anyone. A businessman, a teacher, just another person trying to figure out life. He stood when he saw her. "Hi," he said. "Hi. You look, He stopped, started over. "You look happy." "I am, mostly." She sat down. "You look different." "I got a job, teaching." That surprised her. "Teaching what?" "Business ethics, at a community college in Mapo. Turns out having first-hand experience with how not to run an organization makes me qualified to teach people better options." "Do your students know that I used to run a criminal enterprise?" "No, my record's clean except for the manslaughter charge. And even that got sealed after I completed probation early." "How did you complete it early?" "Turned out my community service hours could be fulfilled by mentoring at-risk youth. helping kids who might otherwise end up in organizations like the one I ran. He smiled slightly. Chen's idea. Said it was poetic justice. Is it working? The mentoring? Yeah, the kids are smart, angry, desperate for someone to show them a different path. I understand that. He paused. Not sure I'm qualified to show them anything, but I'm trying. A waitress came. They ordered coffee, sat in slightly awkward silence while they waited. This is weird, Lyra said finally. Very weird. Good weird or bad weird? Not sure yet. The coffee arrived. They both reached for sugar at the same time, hands brushing. The contact sent electricity through Lyra's arm. Lucien pulled back quickly like he'd been burned. Sorry, he said. Don't be. They doctored their coffee in silence, sipped, made small talk about weather and Seoul traffic and the kind of meaningless conversation that let them not talk about what they were really thinking. Finally, Lucien set down his cup. I need to say something, he said. Okay. I spent the last year trying to figure out if what I felt for you was real or just trauma bonding or some desperate attempt to feel human again. I went to therapy, talked to professionals, did all the things you're supposed to do to process trauma. And it's real, whatever this is. It's real. He looked at her. But I also know I'm not the same person who pulled you out of the rain, and you're not the same person who grabbed me, so I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you that if you want to explore this, whatever this is, I'm here. Lyra's heart hammered. What if it doesn't work? Then it doesn't work, and we both move on knowing we tried. What if it does work and we realize we're only good together when we're surviving something? Then we'll have learned something important about ourselves. What if I break your heart? Then I'll survive. I'm good at that. He smiled. What if you don't? Lyra looked at him across the table, at the scars and the tired eyes and the man who'd spent a year becoming someone new. She thought about the woman she'd been, terrified, controlled, small, and the woman she'd become, harder, wiser, carrying damage that would never fully heal. She thought about coffee and second chances and whether two broken people could build something whole. I'm still figuring myself out, she said carefully. I'm not ready for anything serious. I might not be ready for months, maybe longer. That's fine. I have baggage, nightmares, days where I can't stand being touched. So do I. I might hurt you. You might. Lucien reached across the table, didn't touch her, just laid his hand palm up halfway between them. An offer. Or we might figure out how to help each other heal. Won't know unless we try. Lyra looked at his hand, at the scars across his knuckles, at the vulnerability in the gesture. Then she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers gently, carefully, like she was something precious that might break if he held too tightly. Just coffee, she said. For now. Just coffee, he agreed. For now. They sat there holding hands across a cafe table in Seoul while the city moved around them. Two people who'd survived darkness trying to figure out what light looked like. It wasn't perfect, wasn't easy, wasn't the kind of love story that ended with fireworks and certainty. But it was real, and real was enough. 6 months after that first coffee, Lucien asked Lyra to marry him. They were standing in a park in Mapo, the same neighborhood where he'd grown up, where his mother had dreamed of helping people before cancer took those dreams away. It was raining. Because, of course, it was raining. This is insane, Lyra said. We've only been officially dating for 6 months. We've known each other 2 years, survived things most couples never experience, broken and rebuilt ourselves while figuring out if this was real. Lucien was still on one knee, rain soaking through his jacket. I know it's fast, but I also know I don't want to spend another day wondering if we're going to work. I want to actively work at it. With you. If you'll have me. What if we're only good at trauma and chaos? Then we'll be bored together. Sounds nice, honestly. What if I'm still too broken? Then we'll be broken together until we're not. Lyra looked down at him, at the man who'd saved her and destroyed her and helped her rebuild herself into someone stronger, at the rain sliding down his face, at the ring in his hand. Simple, practical, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry his old life would have demanded. This is a terrible idea, she said. Probably. We're going to fight. I'm going to have bad days. You're going to have bad days. I know. I might always be a little broken. So will I. But you're asking anyway. I'm asking anyway. Lyra pulled him to his feet, kissed him in the rain, tasted salt and water and 2 years of surviving together. Yes, she whispered against his mouth. You ridiculous man. Yes. They got married 3 months later in a ceremony so small it barely qualified as one. Just them, Chen as officiant, 2 witnesses they'd paid off the street, and vows they wrote themselves in a courthouse that smelled like floor polish and paperwork. Afterward, they opened a restaurant. It started as a joke. Lyra mentioned that Lucien's cooking was the first thing that had made her feel safe in his penthouse. He said her grandmother's recipes, the ones she'd described from Detroit, sounded like the kind of food his mother used to make. Then Chen mentioned that one of her clients owned a building in Mapo with a vacant street-level space. 6 months later, the Morning Glory opened its doors. It was small, 15 tables. A menu that blended Southern American comfort food with Korean home cooking in ways that shouldn't have worked but did. Lyra's fried chicken served over Lucien's kimchi rice, his mother's jigae recipes alongside her grandmother's collard greens, soul food that spoke multiple languages. They didn't advertise, didn't market, just opened the doors and let word spread. Within 6 months, they had a wait list. Within a year, food critics were calling it revolutionary. But that wasn't why they kept doing it. They kept doing it because every night the restaurant filled with people looking for comfort, for warmth, for the kind of food that felt like home, even if you'd never been there. They kept doing it because feeding people who needed feeding felt like keeping a promise, his mother's promise, about helping when someone reached out, about being the solid thing someone could grab onto in the storm. Lyra worked front of house, managing reservations and greeting guests and making sure everyone felt welcome. She was good at it, reading people, understanding what they needed before they knew themselves. Lucien ran the kitchen, quiet and focused, and occasionally yelling at line cooks in Korean when they fucked up his mother's recipes. He was good at it too, creating order from chaos, turning raw ingredients into something nourishing. They hired staff carefully. Former addicts trying to rebuild, ex-cons looking for second chances, immigrants struggling to find their footing. The kind of people who understood that sometimes you needed someone to believe in you before you could believe in yourself. The restaurant became more than a business. It became proof that broken people could build something beautiful if they had the time and space and support to try. 2 years after opening, Lyra finished her research fellowship and published a paper on community-based healthcare models. It got attention from policymakers and reform advocates. She started consulting with clinics throughout Seoul, helping them restructure their approach to patient care. Lucien's mentoring program expanded. He was working with 30 kids now, teaching them business skills and conflict resolution and how to recognize when someone was trying to recruit them into the life he'd escaped. 3 of his former students now worked in the Morning Glory's kitchen. They built a life, messy and imperfect and sometimes difficult, but theirs. They fought sometimes. Lyra had days where Damien's voice still echoed in her head, telling her she was weak and worthless. Lucien had nightmares about Victor and Jin Ho and all the violence he'd orchestrated before he learned there were other options. But they also laughed, danced in the empty restaurant after closing, fell asleep tangled together on their apartment couch while rain drummed against windows, built something that looked remarkably like happiness, even if neither of them fully trusted it yet. 5 years after that night in the rain, Lyra woke up to find Lucien already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "What?" she mumbled. "Nothing, just thinking. About how I spent 15 years believing I was irredeemable, that the violence I'd done meant I'd never be anything except what my father made me." He traced a finger along her shoulder. "And then you grabbed me in the rain and refused to let me stay buried in that story. I didn't do anything. You chose to change. You gave me a reason to choose." He kissed her forehead. "I've been meaning to tell you something." "Sounds ominous." "It's not. It's just—" He paused. "I found my mother's grave last week. First time I'd visited since the funeral, put flowers on it, told her about the restaurant, about you, about the kids I'm mentoring." Lyra's throat tightened. "What did you say?" "I said I was sorry it took me so long to understand what she meant. About helping people. About that being the thing that separates humans from monsters." His voice was rough now. And I said thank you for making me promise, because that promise led me to you, and you led me to this life. And this life is the first one that's ever felt worth living. Lyra kissed him, tasted salt and realized he was crying. Or maybe she was. Hard to tell when you were this tangled together. She'd be proud of you, Lyra whispered. I hope so. I know so. The man she raised is teaching kids there's a better way. Feeding people who need feeding. Building something good from the ashes of something terrible. That's exactly what she wanted. They lay there holding each other while Seoul woke up outside their window. Somewhere in the city, the morning glory was being prepped for the dinner service. Former criminals and recovering addicts and people rebuilding their lives were chopping vegetables and preparing stocks and setting tables. Somewhere in Seoul, Damien was serving the 3rd year of his sentence, learning what consequences tasted like. Somewhere in the city's underground, Chen's coalition maintained the careful balance that kept violence surgical instead of chaotic. But here in this apartment, Lyra and Lucien were just 2 people who'd found each other in the rain and decided that surviving wasn't enough. They wanted to live. And so they did. 7 years after grabbing a stranger in the rain, Lyra stood in the Morning Glory's kitchen helping prep for what would be their busiest night yet. A food critic from New York was visiting. But that wasn't what had her nervous. She was pregnant. 3 months. Just starting to show. They hadn't told anyone yet. Not the staff, not Chen, not the kids Lucien mentored, just them. Holding this secret carefully like the precious, terrifying thing it was. You okay? Lucien asked, noticing her hands trembling as she chopped vegetables. Nervous. About tonight? About everything. She set down the knife. What if we fuck this up? What if we're terrible parents? What if we pass on all our damage to this kid? Lucien moved behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. Then we'll fuck it up together and get therapy and do our best to raise someone who knows they're loved. That's all anyone can do. Your best involves teaching a human to navigate a world that's still full of violence and cruelty and people like we used to be. My best involves showing a human that there's another way, that you can survive darkness and still choose light, that broken people can build beautiful things if they're willing to do the work. He turned her to face him. Look around, Lyra. This restaurant, these people, this life we built. This is proof that change is possible. That's what we'll teach them. Lyra looked around the Morning Glory, at the staff who'd become family, at the customers who came back week after week because the food tasted like home, at the physical proof that 2 people who should have destroyed each other had somehow built something nourishing instead. We're really doing this, she said. Yeah, we are. It's terrifying. It's also amazing. The dinner service that night was chaos in the best way. The critic loved everything. The kitchen staff performed like a symphony. Customers laughed and ate and left happy. And Lyra stood in the doorway between front of house and kitchen, watching it all unfold, one hand resting on her stomach where new life was growing, and thought about promises. About the promise Lucien's mother had made him make, about helping people when they reached out, about being solid enough to be grabbed in the storm, about the promise she'd made to herself, to never be small again, to never let fear win, about the promise she and Lucien were making to the person growing inside her, to show them that survival was just the beginning, that the real work was figuring out how to live after. The restaurant closed at midnight. They sent the staff home with leftovers and bonuses, cleaned the kitchen together in comfortable silence, locked the door behind them, and stood on the street looking at their reflection in the window. You ready to go home? Lucien asked. Lyra looked at him, at the man who'd saved her and broken her and helped her rebuild stronger, at the life they'd built from ashes and rain and one desperate choice in the darkness. I'm already home, she said. And she was. Not because of the restaurant or the apartment or Seoul itself, but because home had stopped being a place and started being a person, a promise, a choice they made every day to build something worth keeping. They walked through Seoul's midnight streets hand in hand. Rain started falling halfway home because of course it did. But this time when the storm came, Lyra didn't run from it. She just pulled Lucien closer and kept walking. Because she'd learned something in the years since that desperate night. Rain wasn't the enemy. Fear wasn't the end. They were just weather you had to move through to reach what came after. And what came after was worth everything.